Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto awakened power of creation and destruction and fell in love with Rias Gremory and Akeno Himejima? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. An End and a Beginning. The air was poison. It tasted of dust and blood and ozone, a flavor so thick it felt like drowning with every breath. The sky, a nauseating canvas of sickly violet and ruptured crimson, pulsed with a malevolent light that offered no warmth, only the promise of a final, grinding end. Gravity was a fickle suggestion, shifting and groaning as the world around them bled into alien geometries. This was Kagaya's domain, a place where reality itself was held hostage. Naruto Uzumaki's lungs burned. Every muscle fiber screamed in protest, a symphony of agony conducted by exhaustion and the deep, throbbing ache of shattered bone. To his left, Sasuke stood as a mirror of his own depletion, the Rinnegan in his left eye weeping a thin line of blood down his cheek. His Chikuto was steady, but the slight tremor in his hand betrayed the near-total absence of chakra. Behind them, Sakura, her face a mask of grim determination and dirt, knelt over Kakashi's prone form. Her hands glowing with the last dregs of her medical ninjutsu. Her reserves, once a vast sea, were now little more than a puddle. They were losing. The truth of it was a cold, heavy stone in Naruto's gut. They had fought with everything they had. They had coordinated, adapted, and pushed beyond every conceivable limit. Naruto had thrown mountains of Rasenshuriken, Sasuke had twisted space with his Amenetejikara. Sakura had reshaped the battlefield with her godlike strength, and Kakashi had orchestrated their efforts with the brilliance of a master strategist. Kurama, a roaring inferno of defiant chakra within him, was fading, his roars growing weaker, his energy fraying like an old rope. "She's adapting too fast." Sasuke's voice was a low rasp, cutting through the hum of the dying dimension. "She learns our patterns. Another direct assault is suicide." Naruto wiped a smear of blood from his mouth with the back of his tattered sleeve. "Then we don't do a direct assault." He glanced back at Sakura, whose hands were flickering, the green glow of her ninjutsu sputtering like a dying candle. Kakashi was still breathing, but only just. They were out of time. Out of tricks. Almost. A desperate, insane idea began to coalesce in his mind, born from the absolute certainty of their impending doom. It was a plan with no guarantee of success and a very high probability of turning him into a thin smear of atoms across the dimensional plane. "Kurama," he whispered into the echoing space of his mindscape, the familiar sewer now cracked and crumbling. "How much you got left?" "For one last one. The biggest you've ever seen." The great fox's growl was more of a weary sigh, the sound of a fading god. "Everything I have, Kit. But it won't be enough to destroy her. At best, it'll punch a hole in this place. And it will burn you out completely. There's no coming back from it. Don't need to destroy her," Naruto thought, his eyes locking onto Kagaya, who hovered serenely amidst the chaos. Her Byakugan eyes seeing every flicker of their chakra, every desperate plan. "Just need to make an opening." Sakura, her head snapped up, her green eyes wide with exhaustion. "When you see it, you get Kakashi-sensei and Sasuke out of here. Use whatever you have left to jump. Don't wait for me." Understanding dawned on Sasuke's face, followed by immediate protest. "Don't be an idiot, Naruto. We fight together. And we die together if we do." Naruto shot back, his voice raw with an authority that silenced even Sasuke. This wasn't the knuckle-headed ninja from the academy. This was a man forged in the crucible of war. A sage who had seen the precipice and was willing to throw himself over it for the sake of his comrades. "She's tied to this dimension. If I can overload it, stabilize it for even a second, you can escape. Get back home. Tell everyone." He trailed off, the words sticking in his throat. Sakura's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, a single, sharp jerk of her head. She understood. This was the nature of their bond, of the sacrifices they had to make. Naruto took a deep breath, planting his feet on the groaning, unstable rock. He held out his right hand, and the familiar, comforting swirl of chakra began to form. But this was different. He wasn't just drawing on his own reserves. He was pulling everything. The last dregs of the Six Paths Sage Mode. The final embers of Kurama's life force, every stray scrap of nature energy he could absorb from this dying world. Now, Kit, Kurama roared, a final, defiant blaze of glory. The Rasengan exploded in his palm. It was no longer a controlled sphere of blue energy. It was a miniature sun, a chaotic, screeching vortex of pure power that buckled the space around it. Golden light from the Sage Mode fused with Kurama's violent red chakra, creating a blinding, furious orange that pulsed with unimaginable power. His arms screamed as his muscles tore, his bones cracked under the strain of containing a force that was never meant to be held. Sasuke, now, Naruto bellowed, his voice barely audible over the shriek of the technique. Sasuke's Rinnegan flared. He grabbed Sakura and the unconscious Kakashi. His own power stretched to its breaking point. He had to time it perfectly. Kagaya's serene expression finally broke, replaced by a flicker of alarm. She recognized the threat, not to her person, but to her world. An all-killing ash bone shot from her palm, a sliver of absolute death aimed straight for Naruto's heart. He didn't even try to dodge. There was no point. He was all in. Go. With a final, guttural scream that tore his throat raw, Naruto charged. He wasn't just running. He was pouring his entire existence, his very soul, into that single, forward motion. The world dissolved into a blur of light and sound. He saw the ash bone closing in. He felt the searing heat of his own attack incinerating his arm. He saw the flicker of black flames as Sasuke opened a portal behind him. And then, oblivion. The ash bone struck him in the chest at the exact same moment his apocalyptic Rasengan slammed into the fabric of the dimension. For a single, silent, crystalline moment, there was no pain. There was only a feeling of being unraveled. His consciousness, so intrinsically tied to his body and his chakra, came loose. He felt Kurama's presence, that warm, grumpy, unshakable anchor in his soul for his entire life. Extinguished like a snuffed flame. The emptiness that followed was a chasm, a void more terrifying than any enemy he had ever faced. The pain of that loss was sharper than any physical wound. Kurama, his body was disintegrating, turning to dust under the power of Kagaya's jutsu. His chakra network, the pathways of his life's energy, was being incinerated by his own attack. He was dying. He knew it. He had accepted it. But something else was happening. As his own energy vanished, as his very concept of self began to fray, something dormant, something ancient and fun. Damantle that had slept in his bloodline for 1,000 years, finally awakened. It was not chakra. It was something far, far older. It was the universe's source code. Two equal and opposite forces shed into the vacuum of his fading existence. One was a golden, effervescent warmth, the feeling of a star being born, the hum of life itself, the boundless potential of creation. The other was a terrifying, silent, absolute cold. It was the crushing emptiness between galaxies, the patient finality of entropy, the power to unmake, to erase, the stark, clean finality of destruction. These were not energies to be wielded. They were the very principles upon which reality was built. And they were now pouring into him, rewriting him, turning the dying embers of Naruto Uzumaki into the heart of a newborn nebula. The power surge was absolute. It did not just destabilize Kagaya's dimension, it shattered it. Reality fractured like a pane of glass struck by a hammer. The sickly violet sky cracked, and through the fissures, Naruto saw everything. He saw worlds of gleaming metal towers and flying ships. He saw realms of fire and brimstone where horned creatures roared. He saw a celestial kingdom of light and song. He saw the past, the present, and 1,000 possible futures, all at once. His disintegrating body was pulled through the cracks, dragged across the raw, screaming space between worlds. His mind, unable to process the infinite sensory input, latched onto a single, terrifying vision. He saw a void, not the absence of light, but the absence of existence itself. A perfect, silent, starless nothing. And from the heart of that nothing, a single, possessive thought echoed not in his ears, but in the very core of his newfound power. Mine. Then the vision was gone, and he was falling. The agonizing journey ended as abruptly as it began. He slammed into something hard, the impact jarring him back into a semblance of physical awareness. The cacophony of the multiverse faded, replaced by the gentle patter of rain and the distant, unfamiliar rumble of something. He lay there for an eternity or a second, adrift. His first coherent thought was that he was alive. His second was that he was alone. The loss of Kurama returned with the force of a physical blow, a hollow ache in his chest where a sun used to be. Slowly, painfully, he pushed himself up. His body felt wrong. The intricate network of chakra pathways that had been his lifeblood was gone, silent. In its place was a quiet, deep, humming reservoir of something else. He felt no pain. He looked down at his chest where the ash bone had struck him. There was no wound. His clothes were shredded. His right arm, which had been holding the Rasengan, was bare, the sleeve in his jacket incinerated away, but his skin was pristine. He was completely, impossibly, healed. He was in a narrow alleyway, sandwiched between two tall buildings made of dark brick and stained concrete. The ground was slick with rain and littered with refuse. The air smelled of wet asphalt, garbage, and something savory from a nearby vent. It was all so mundane, so jarringly different from the cosmic battlefield he had just left. He tried to sense for chakra signatures. For Sasuke, for Sakura, nothing. The world around him was not silent, but it was humming with energies he had never felt before. To the east, a powerful, deep thrumming, like a well-fed predator at rest. It felt ancient, aristocratic, and tinged with a scent of brimstone. To the west, a sharp, piercing note, pure and bright, but so rigid it felt brittle. And scattered throughout the city, dozens of smaller, varied energies, some that felt like crackling lightning and shadows, others that felt like the raw, untamed power of nature. It was a symphony of forces sage mode could only vaguely interpret. He was blind here, a stranger in a strange land. Panic, cold and sharp, tried to rise in his throat, but years of war had taught him to master it. He squashed it down, replacing it with a singular focus. Assess, adapt, survive. He staggered to his feet, using the wall for support. His legs felt steady enough. He peered out of the alley. He saw bizarre, cellus metal carriages rushing by on a black river of stone, their lights cutting through the twilight gloom. People walked under strange, personal canopies, their clothes unlike anything he had ever seen. The buildings scraped the sky, their windows glowing like 1,000 captured stars. He had no idea where he was. It was another world. The realization settled not with a bang, but with a quiet, grim finality. His sacrifice hadn't just saved his friends, it had exiled him. A soft, pained mewling sound cut through his thoughts. He looked down. Curled beside a leaking trash bin was a small, black cat. Its fur was matted and wet, and one of its back legs was bent at a sickeningly unnatural angle, a shard of bone peeking through the skin. It shivered, its green eyes wide with pain and fear. In that moment, all the cosmic horror, the grief, and the disorientation faded away, replaced by a simple, overwhelming instinct that had defined his entire life. He saw something small and hurting, and he had to help it. He knelt, his movements slow and deliberate so as not to spook the creature. "Hey there," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "It's okay. I'm not gonna hurt you." He reached out his hand. Not to use a jutsu, he couldn't feel his chakra anyway, but just to offer comfort. As his fingers neared the cat's mangled leg, that new, humming power within him responded to his will. It wasn't a conscious command. It was as natural as breathing. A soft, golden light, warm and gentle, bloomed from his palm. It was not the green glow of medical ninjutsu. This was the light of a sunrise, the color of pure life. It enveloped the cat's leg. The creature flinched, but didn't cry out. Naruto watched, mesmerized, as reality itself seemed to bend to his intention. The bone didn't just mend, it flowed back into its proper shape. Torn muscle and sinew re-wove themselves like golden thread. The skin sealed over, leaving behind not a scar, but perfect, unblemished fur. The entire process took less than 3 seconds. The cat blinked. It tentatively put weight on the leg, then all of its weight. It stood up, let out a healthy meow, and began to rub its head against Naruto's hand, purring like a tiny engine. Naruto stared at his hand, then at the cat, his mind reeling. What was that? It wasn't a technique. There were no hand signs, no chakra molding. It was just thought, intent. He had wanted the cat to be whole. And the universe had simply agreed. The act, however small, had consequences. When that golden light had flared, it was not a release of chakra. It was a pulse of pure, undiluted creation. To the supernaturally sensitive inhabitants of this town, it was not a flicker, but a detonation. It was as if a new star had just been born in the middle of their territory, a beacon of power so immense, so pure, and so utterly alien that it defied all known classification. In a lavish, Victorian-style clubhouse on the grounds of Kuo Academy, a chess game came to an abrupt halt. A crimson-haired girl of stunning beauty, her violet eyes wide with disbelief, dropped upon. The power that washed over her was overwhelming. It was not demonic, nor holy, nor draconic. It felt primordial, foundational. Rias, a gentle, feminine voice asked from beside her. Rias Gremory stood up, her gaze fixed in the direction of the alleyway miles away. Akeno, she said, her voice ht with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Did you feel that? Her queen, the beautiful Akeno Himejima, had also risen, a sensual smile gracing her lips, though her eyes betrayed a deep, serious shock. Era, it would be impossible not to. It felt like the beginning of the world. Back in the alley, Naruto was still trying to process what had happened when the atmosphere changed. The rain, which had been a steady drizzle, stopped. The air grew still and heavy, charged with an energy that made the hairs on his arms stand up. The distant thrumming he had sensed earlier was no longer distant. It was close, and it was coming for him. He stood up, instinctively placing himself between the approaching energy and the small cat, which hissed softly. He had no weapons, no knowledge of this world, and a power inside him he didn't understand. But he was not afraid. He was a shinobi of Konoha. He would face whatever was coming. The air in front of him began to shimmer. Intricate, crimson lines of light spread out across the ground, forming a complex circle filled with symbols and patterns that made his eyes ache. A pillar of soft, red light erupted from the circle, and from within it, two figures emerged. The first was the source of the overwhelming demonic energy. She had long, beautiful crimson hair that cascaded down her back, and eyes the color of amethysts that shone with intelligence and power. She wore a stylish uniform and carried herself with an aura of nobility and absolute authority that reminded him of a daimyo. A king. The second woman stood slightly behind her. A graceful and alluring figure with long black hair tied in a ponytail. She had a gentle, almost playful smile on her face, but her violet eyes held a dangerous glint, a hint of wild energy that led just beneath the surface like lightning in a summer cloud. They stared at him, their expressions a mixture of profound awe and cautious alarm. Naruto met their gaze directly, his own face a neutral mask, betraying none of the turmoil within him. His senses, new as they were, screamed at him that these two women were powerful on a scale he had only ever encountered in beings like the tailed beasts or Kagaya herself. The redhead spoke first, her voice smooth and melodic, yet laced with an undeniable steel. Who, and what, in the name of the 72 pillars, are you? Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. A king's offer, a sage's will. The silence in the alley was a living thing, thick and heavy with unspoken power. The rain had ceased entirely, the air held captive by the sheer presence of the three figures. Naruto stood his ground, a pillar of calm amidst a sea of unknown energies. The small black cat, seemingly sensing the gravity of the moment, had flattened itself to the ground behind his legs, its purring silenced. Rias Gremory's violet eyes narrowed, her mind racing. The power radiating from the blonde man was a paradox. It was immense, a bottomless well that made the most powerful archdevils she knew seem like flickering candles in a hurricane. Yet, it was placid. It had no murderous intent, no hunger for domination, no corrupting influence. It simply was. It was the power of a sunset, or a tectonic plate, or a deep ocean current, a force of nature, not of ambition. Her initial assumption, that he was a powerful stray magician or a mythical creature drawn to the town's nexus of energy, felt laughably inadequate. Akeno's smile remained, but it had lost its playful edge. Her senses, honed by her dual heritage as a devil and a fallen angel, were screaming at her. The man's aura didn't just feel powerful. It felt foundational. It resonated with both the holy power she inherited from her father and the demonic energy she wielded as Rias's queen, yet it was beholden to neither. It was as if she were looking at the common ancestor of light and dark. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. "I'll ask again," Rias said, her voice a carefully modulated instrument of authority. "Who are you?" Naruto considered her question. Who was he? Naruto Uzumaki, Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails, Sage of the Six Paths, Hero of Konoha. None of those titles meant anything here. They were ghosts from a world that was likely lost to him forever. He was a man with no home, no allies, and a power he was only just beginning to comprehend. "My name is Naruto," he answered, his voice steady. "As for what I am, I'm still figuring that out." His honesty was disarming. Devils were creatures of lineage, titles, and established power. Such a simple, unadorned answer from a being of his caliber was unheard of. "A being of your magnitude doesn't simply appear from nowhere, Naruto," Rias pressed, taking a half step forward. The crimson Gremory crest glowed faintly on the ground beneath her. "This is the territory of the Gremory clan. Your sudden arrival, and the wave of power you just released, has not gone unnoticed. You are an anomaly, and anomalies in my territory are my concern." He gave a slight nod, accepting the logic in her words. "I didn't ask to come here. It was an accident." The grief for Kurama, for his friends, for his entire world, was a fresh, gaping wound, but he couldn't show it. Not now. Weakness here would be a death sentence. Rias saw an opportunity. This being was powerful, disoriented, and alone. He was the ultimate prize, a piece that could read. Find the entire game of power in the underworld. She would make her offer. "I can offer you a place, Naruto," she said, her voice softening, taking on a persuasive, regal tone. "A new life, purpose. You clearly possess power beyond measure. But you are adrift in a world you do not understand. There are forces here, devils, fallen angels, that would see you as a threat to be eliminated or a tool to be exploited. Alone, you are a target." She extended a delicate hand, palm up. "Join my household. Become a member of my peerage. I will give you my name, my protection, and a family to stand with. In return for your service, you will have a home, and you will never have to be a target again." Naruto looked at her outstretched hand, then back to her eyes. He could feel the intent behind her words. The structure of the pact she was offering. It wasn't entirely malicious. She seemed to genuinely believe she was offering him a kindness, a sanctuary. But he could also feel the invisible chains attached to it. It was a contract of servitude. Master and servant, king and pawn. He had spent his entire life fighting to be acknowledged, to be seen as a person and not a weapon or a monster. He had bowed to no one. He would not start now. He gave her a small, sad smile. "I appreciate the offer, Rias Gremory. And I believe you mean well. But I serve no one." The finality in his tone was absolute. There was no room for negotiation. Rias's eyes widened slightly in surprise. Rejection was not an experience she was accustomed to, especially not from someone in such a vulnerable position. Before she could formulate a response, Akeno's soft giggle cut through the tension. Era, he has a strong will, President," she purred, her eyes alight with genuine interest. "It's been a long time since anyone spoke to you with such conviction." Naruto's gaze shifted to Akeno. He felt the crackle of lightning under her skin, but also a deep, hidden well of pain. He recognized it instantly. It was the same pain he had seen in Gaara, in Nagato, in so many others who had been branded by their heritage. Before their strange standoff could continue, the charged atmosphere was ripped apart by the arrival of new players. The air grew heavy with a corrupt, arrogant energy. 3 figures dropped into the mouth of the alley, landing with a jarring lack of grace. They were men dressed in dark, ragged clothing, and from their backs sprouted single pairs of black, feathered wings. Fallen angels. But they were weak, their power frayed and undisciplined. Carrion birds, not predators. The leader, a man with a sneering face and a jagged scar across his lip, let his lecherous gaze sweep over Rias and Akeno. Well, look what we have here. The little Gremory princess and her pet Thunder Priestess, playing with a stray. We were just tracking a minor devil who ran this way, but this is a much better prize." His 2 companions chuckled, their eyes gleaming with malice. They brandished spears made of pure, concentrated light. The holy energy anathema to a devil's body. Rias's expression turned to one of cold fury. You are far from Gregory territory, fallen. Crawl back to whatever gutter you slithered out of before I forget my diplomacy. The scarred fallen laughed, a harsh, grating sound. We don't answer to Azazel anymore. Some of us still believe in the old ways. And the old ways say a Gremory's head is worth a king's ransom. He then turned his attention to Naruto. As for you, Blondie, whatever you are, you're in the way. Get lost, or we'll turn you into a pile of ash. Naruto didn't move. He simply watched them, his calm demeanor seeming to infuriate the fallen leader even more. He had faced down gods and monsters. These three were nothing more than bullies. Last chance, the fallen snarled, leveling his spear of light. Naruto sighed, a sound of profound weariness. You should leave, he said, his voice quiet, yet it carried over the tension with perfect clarity. It wasn't a threat, it was a statement of fact. That was all the provocation the fallen needed. With a synchronized roar, the three of them lunged forward, thrusting their spears of light not just at Rias, but at Naruto himself. They clearly intended to eliminate the unknown factor first. Akeno's hands crackled with lightning, and Rias's aura of destruction began to flare. But they were too late. Heat tips of the spears were inches from Naruto's chest. And then, they were gone. There was no sound, no explosion, no flash of light or dramatic counterattack. One moment, the three spears of rated holy power were hurtling through the air, moments from impact. The next, they simply ceased to exist. They didn't shatter or dissipate. They were unmade, erased from reality as if they had never been thrown at all. A faint wisp of ozone was the only evidence they had ever existed. The three fallen angels froze mid-lunge, their faces a comical mask of shock and confusion. They stared at their empty hands, then at Naruto, who hadn't moved a single inch. Rias Gremory felt a cold dread wash over her that had nothing to do with the fallen. Her family's signature ability was the power of destruction, a force that could disintegrate matter and energy. But what she had just witnessed was not that. Her power was a violent, chaotic storm. This was a quiet, clean, absolute negation. It was the power of an author erasing a sentence from a page. Naruto raised his right hand, palm open. I told you to leave. This time, a soft, golden light bloomed from his hand. It was the same light he had used on the cat, the light of creation. It pulsed once, and the stained concrete and asphalt at the fallen angel's feet came alive. Thick, woody roots, impossibly strong, erupted from the ground. They didn't pierce or crush. They flowed like water, wrapping around the fallen's legs, arms, and torsos, binding them in an unbreakable, living cage. The roots were gentle, holding them firm without breaking bone or even tearing their clothes. The fallen struggled for a moment, but it was useless. They were held fast, their wings pinned, their connection to their power muffled by the sheer life energy of the roots. The scarred leader stared at Naruto, his arrogance completely shattered, replaced by raw, primal fear. What are you? He stammered. Naruto's gaze was hard, his blue eyes as cold as the space between stars. I'm the one who gave you a choice. He then ignored them, turning his full attention back to Rias and Akeno, who were staring at the scene, utterly speechless. The display of power was staggering. He had wielded two diametrically opposed forces, absolute negation and vibrant creation, as easily as breathing. He had neutralized a threat with overwhelming power, yet without malice or bloodshed. It was a demonstration of control and philosophy that was utterly alien to the conflict-driven world of devils. Naruto broke the silence, his expression softening slightly. You offered me a home in exchange for my service. I refused. He took a step forward, the bound fallen angels forgotten behind him. Now, I'll make you an offer. I am lost, and you seem to know this world. You need answers about me. I need to understand where I am. He looked from Rias's stunned face to Akeno's intrigued one. Let's talk, he said, the words simple, but the implication immense. Not as a king to a stray, but as equals. The bound and gagged fallen leader, caught in the grip of the living roots, felt a sudden, terrifying chill that had nothing to do with his capture. A whisper echoed in the back of his mind, a discordant, maddening tune. In his terror-stricken state, a single, garbled phrase slipped past his lips, a delirious murmur that was almost lost in the quiet alley. The song of the end has begun. Rias Gremory looked at the man in front of her. He was an enigma, a paradox of gentle kindness and terrifying power. Her plans of recruiting him, of making him a piece on her chessboard, had been rendered obsolete. You don't ask a force of nature to become a pawn. She took a slow breath, composing herself, her regal bearing returning. A slow smile spread across her lips. This was far more interesting. All right, Naruto, she said, her voice a purr of intrigue. Let's talk. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. Echoes of the Void. 2 days passed in a strange, suspended reality. Naruto found himself in the paradoxical position of being both a guest of honor and a prisoner under observation. His lodgings were in a spare room within the sprawling, antique-filled clubhouse of the Occult Research Club, a building that served as the Gremory Peerage's base of operations on Earth. It was comfortable, clean, and felt about as much like a home as a gilded cage. He spent most of his time observing. He watched the other members of Rias's peerage, the quiet and stoic Kaneko Tuju and the charming, ever-smiling Yuto Kiba, as they went about their routines. They were clearly powerful, their energies distinct and sharp, but they treated him with a wide berth, their curiosity warring with a palpable sense of awe-tinged fear. They had felt his power, and they did not know what to make of him. He did not press them. He understood the caution of soldiers in the presence of an unknown weapon. Rias had attempted to explain the structure of their world in a series of conversations that felt more like polite interrogations. She spoke of the 3 great factions, devils, angels, and fallen angels, and the fragile truce that held them in a cold peace after a cataclysmic war. She explained the peerage system, the evil pieces modeled after chess, and the complex politics of the underworld. Naruto listened patiently, absorbing the information. It was a world built on contracts, hierarchies, and a constant, simmering conflict. In many ways, it was not so different from his own. This afternoon, however, Rias had decided a change of scenery was in order. You cannot learn everything from within these walls, she'd said, her tone businesslike but her eyes holding a flicker of genuine curiosity. To understand this world, you have to walk in it. And so he found himself walking through the bustling center of Kuo Town, flanked by Rias and Akeno. The sheer sensory input was still overwhelming. The roar of the metal carriages, cars, Rias had called them, the sea of unfamiliar faces. The glowing rectangles people held to their ears to speak to others miles away. It was a world of bewildering, casual miracles. Yet, he adapted with the quiet focus of a shinobi on reconnaissance. He filed away the details, his mind a quiet whirlwind of analysis. You're taking this all in stride, Rias remarked, watching him as he observed the traffic flow with an unnervingly tactical gaze. Most people who stumble into our world from a different background are overwhelmed. It's just a different kind of forest, Naruto replied, his eyes briefly tracking a high-speed train on a distant, elevated track. The trees are taller, the animals are louder, but the principles are the same. You learn the patterns, you find the dangers, you identify the safe paths. Akeno let out a soft laugh, a melody that turned several heads as they walked. Era, you make it sound so simple. Most men would be begging for answers or running in fear. But you just watch. What is it you're looking for, Naruto-kun? The honorific was playful, a test. He met her gaze, his own perfectly serious. Weak points, he said simply. Akeno's smile widened, her interest piqued. In the town, in everything. His bluntness was a strange sort of charisma. It was utterly devoid of ego. He wasn't boasting, he was stating his nature. Rias found herself intrigued despite her best efforts to remain objective. He was not a potential asset to be managed. He was an independent power, and understanding how he thought was becoming more critical, and more fascinating, by the hour. Their walk led them to a large, peaceful park in the center of the city. Old willow trees draped their branches over a serene pond where koi fish swam in lazy circles. Families were out enjoying the afternoon sun, their laughter a stark contrast to the world of shadows Rias and Akeno inhabited. They passed a small, well-kept Shinto shrine at the edge of the park. It was a humble structure of wood and stone, a place of quiet reverence. As they drew near, Naruto noticed a subtle shift in Akeno's demeanor. Her playful smile tightened almost imperceptibly at the corners. Her posture stiffened. He could feel it in her energy, the crackling. Demonic lightning recoiled slightly from the pure, holy aura of the shrine, and a colder, sharper energy within her bristled in response. It was a quiet, internal war. Naruto slowed his pace, falling into step beside her as Rias walked a few paces ahead. He didn't look at her, instead keeping his eyes on the shrine. "It must be loud in your head sometimes," he said, his voice low and devoid of judgment. Having two different songs playing at the same time. Akeno stopped dead, her breath hitched. No one had ever spoken of her heritage so plainly, so calmly. To the devils, she was a hybrid, a curiosity. A powerful tool whose fallen blood was a useful but slightly distasteful part of her arsenal. To the fallen, she was a traitor. To the angels, an abomination. Her entire existence was a conflict. A secret shame she papered over with a sadistic, teasing personality. She turned to look at him. His face held no pity, no disgust, no morbid curiosity. Only a simple, profound understanding. He wasn't judging the songs, he was just acknowledging that she could hear them. "What would you know about that?" she whispered, her voice losing its usual playful lilt, becoming fragile and raw. Naruto finally met her eyes, and for the first time, she saw the full weight of the ancient grief he carried. "I spent my whole life with a caged sun roaring in my gut," he said softly. "Everyone in my village heard the noise, and they hated me for it. I know what it's like when the music inside you makes everyone else want to cover their ears." Tears pricked at the corners of Akeno's eyes. She blinked them away furiously, a genuine, unguarded smile touching her lips. It was a smile so beautiful and so vulnerable that it took Naruto's breath away. In that moment, the connection between them deepened, reforged from a bond of mutual curiosity into one of shared understanding. He saw past the queen's mask to the woman beneath, and she, for the first time, felt truly seen. The moment of peace was shattered. A wave of power, cold, sterile, and utterly devoid of emotion, washed over the park. It was not demonic, not holy, not natural. It was the energy of a concept, of an unbending, absolute law. It felt like a surgeon's scalpel. A human screamed, a sound of pure terror. The trio's head snapped in the direction of the sound. In the center of a wide plaza near the park's fountain, a scene of stark horror was unfolding. A figure stood over a terrified high school student, a boy no older than 16, who was scrambling backwards on the pavement, his face pale with shock. The figure was tall and lean, encased from head to foot in interlocking plates of pristine, white armor that seemed to absorb the light around it. It wore a featureless, T-shaped visor, betraying no hint of the being within. In one hand, it held a long, crystalline spear that pulsed with the same cold, negating energy. This was not a warrior, it was an instrument of judgment. An executor, hiding behind a nearby bench, whimpering in fear, was a small, imp-like creature with bat wings and terrified, oversized eyes. A stray devil. "The contract is void. The vessel is forfeit." The executor's voice was a synthesized, dispassionate monotone, broadcasted by some unseen speaker. By the celestial accord, the taint of the aberrant must be purged. Rias cursed under her breath. A stray made a pact with a human. A foolish, desperate move. Now heaven's cleaners are here to erase them both. "They're going to kill the boy?" Naruto asked, his voice dangerously low. "To them, the boy is no longer human," Akeno explained. Her own energy crackling around her fists, her gentle moment forgotten. "He is contaminated, a failed experiment to be disposed of." The executor raised its spear, he crystalline tip glowing with a blinding white light, aimed directly at the teenager's heart. The civilians in the park were screaming, running in every direction. The peaceful afternoon turned into a scene of chaos. Rias's hand glowed with her crimson power of destruction. Akeno prepared to summon a bolt of lightning. But Naruto was already gone. He didn't charge. He didn't roar. He simply moved. One moment he was beside them. The next he was a blur of orange and black, covering the 50 yards to the plaza in the space of a single heartbeat. He moved with a silent, fluid grace that was terrifyingly efficient. The ingrained economy of motion of a born warrior. The executor, for all its power, was not prepared for shinobi speed. Before its energy blast could fully form, Naruto was on it. He didn't attack the armor. He attacked the joints. A sharp, precise strike to the wrist knocked the spear away, sending it skittering across the plaza stones. A sweeping leg kick, executed with perfect form, aimed to take the executor off its feet. But the executor was preternaturally fast. It twisted its body, avoiding the sweep, and its free hand lashed out, not with a physical strike, but with a blade of pure, white, negating energy. Naruto felt the attack coming more than he saw it. He threw himself into a back handspring, the energy blade slicing through the air where his chest had been, leaving a faint shimmering distortion in its wake. He landed lightly on his feet, his mind a flurry of calculations. This thing was fast, strong, and its attacks seemed to erase whatever they touched. A direct hit was not an option. The anomaly, the executor's synthesized voice stated, its helmeted head tracking Naruto's every move. The primary target. Your existence is a violation of cosmic law. Surrender for sanctified disassembly. You'll have to try a little harder than that, Naruto shot back, settling into his familiar fighting stance. The executor raised both hands, and a dozen shimmering white projectiles, sharp as needles, materialized in the air around it. With a gesture, they shot towards Naruto from all directions. Rias, watching from the edge of the plaza, tensed. Naruto, be careful, that's annihilation light. It doesn't just destroy, it erases. Naruto didn't need the warning. He could feel the wrongness of the attacks. He moved, weaving, dodging, twisting. He flowed through the storm of lethal projectiles like a leaf on the wind. One of the needles missed his head by an inch and struck the large stone fountain behind him. Instead of chipping or exploding, a perfect, spherical chunk of the fountain simply vanished, leaving a hole with unnervingly smooth edges. While the executor was focused on him, Naruto flicked his wrist. 3 kunai, perfectly formed, materialized from nothing by a flicker of his creation power, shot out. Not at the executor, but at the ground around it. They struck the pavement and vanished in a puff of smoke. A classic substitution feint. The executor's head snapped around, tracking the feint, and in that split second of distraction, Naruto was on it again. He appeared at its side, his fist driving forward not in a clumsy punch, but in a targeted strike aimed at the armored kneecap. The impact was like a hammer hitting an anvil. While the armor held, the executor was knocked off balance. Seeing its primary tactic failing, the executor changed its approach. It slammed its palms onto the ground. Purge Protocol. Sector Gamma. The entire plaza began to glow with a brilliant white light, a massive area of effect attack day. Ignited to vaporize everything within a 100-foot radius. He can't dodge that, Rias shouted, preparing to erect a defensive shield. But Naruto wasn't trying to dodge. He was standing his ground, his expression calm. He held out his left hand, palm facing the epicenter of the glowing light. No, he whispered. A flicker of absolute darkness, a pinprick of pure void, appeared in his palm. It did not expand. It did not explode. It simply absorbed. The brilliant, overwhelming annihilation light that was flooding the plaza was drawn into that tiny spot of nothingness, vanishing without a sound. The power of destruction, used not as a sledgehammer, but as a perfect, surgical drain. In the same instant, he stomped his right foot. The golden light of creation surged from him, not as an attack, but as a shield. The pavement stones that had been cracked and damaged by the brief fight flowed back together. A transparent wall of diamond, pulled and formed from the carbon in the air and the stone of the plaza, erupted in front of the fleeing civilians, shielding them from the stray energies of the fight. He was defending, protecting, and neutralizing, all at the same time, a whirlwind of perfect control. The executor was momentarily stunned, its ultimate move nullified with contemptuous ease. That was all the opening Naruto needed. He closed the distance, and this time, his hand was glowing with a gentle, golden light. He didn't strike. He simply placed his palm flat against the executor's chest plate. The creation energy flowed into the armor, not to destroy it, but to interact with its complex internal systems. The armor's power source overloaded, shorting out with a shower of harmless white sparks. The executor froze mid-motion, its limbs locking up. It crumpled to the ground, paralyzed and helpless. Its internal systems fried. Silence descended on the plaza, broken only by the distant sounds of sirens. Naruto stood over the fallen executor, his breathing even. Rias and Akeno rushed to his side, their faces a mixture of awe and disbelief. How did you? Rias began, but couldn't find the words. Before anyone could question the paralyzed being, a new light began to emanate from its armor, a final, desperate act, a self-destruct sequence. Get back, Naruto commanded, pulling Rias and Akeno behind him. The light grew to a blinding intensity, but there was no explosion. Only the executor's synthesized voice, echoing one last time across the plaza, its monotone filled with the chilling conviction of a martyr. That which can unmake the stars, must never be allowed to weep. The light flashed and then faded, leaving behind nothing. No scrap of armor, no body, no trace it had ever been there. It had erased itself. Naruto turned his attention to the terrified student and the cowering stray devil. He walked over, his demeanor shifting from warrior to protector. He knelt in front of the boy, who was still shaking. "Are you hurt?" Naruto asked, his voice gentle. The boy could only shake his head, speechless. Naruto then looked at the stray devil, which flinched away from him. With another flicker of creation, the minor wounds on the creature healed. It stared at him, its fear replaced by confusion. Naruto stood up and looked at Rias, his expression serious. "He tried to kill a child for making a mistake. He called my power a violation." He clenched his fist. "I don't care who they are. They come back, I'm not going to be so gentle." Rias Gremory looked at the scene before her. The perfectly repaired plaza, the unterrorized civilians, who were now being handled by her peerage. Their memories being subtly altered. The saved boy and the stray devil. And Naruto, standing there not as a monster or a god of destruction, but as a guardian. He hadn't just won a fight. He had enforced his own morality on a situation where their world's ancient rules dictated death. He wasn't a force of nature. He was a force of will. And in that moment, she realized her desire to understand him was changing into something far more dangerous, far more profound. It was becoming respect. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. A Dance of Devils and Gods. The aftermath of the executor's attack was a fragile, ringing silence. Naruto's decisive, yet controlled, intervention had sent a shockwave through the supernatural community far greater than any simple explosion could have. He hadn't just defeated a heavenly warrior, he had imposed a new, unwritten rule on a centuries-old conflict. He had protected the unworthy. In the rigid, power-obsessed society of devils, such an act was not seen as heroic. It was seen as dangerously unpredictable. The summons arrived 3 evenings later. It was not a polite request. A massive, elaborate magic circle, glowing with the imperious crimson of the Gremory clan crest, materialized in the center of the Occult Research Club's main hall. The air crackled with immense power, and a scroll, bound in black silk and sealed with wax, dropped to the floor. Rias picked it up, her expression hardening as she read the flowing, elegant script. "My father requests my presence at the annual Solstice Gala," she announced, her voice tight. She then looked directly at Naruto, who was observing the proceedings with his usual unnerving calm. "And he specifically requests I bring the anomaly, currently under my protection." Akeno, who was pouring tea nearby, paused, her usual smile absent. "The elders have forced his hand," she said softly. "The rumors about the executor and your power must be spreading like wildfire through the underworld. They want to see you for themselves. They want to measure you." Yuto Kiba added from his seat by the window, his hand resting on the hilt of a sheathed sword. "Decide if you're a prize to be claimed or a threat to be neutralized." Naruto processed this, his gaze unwavering. He had faced down his own village's council of elders enough times to know the game. It was about power, perception, and control. Hiding would only feed their fear and suspicion. "When do we leave?" he asked. Rias looked at him, a flicker of surprise and relief in her eyes. She had expected to have to convince him, to explain the intricate dangers and why his presence, however risky, was necessary to maintain her family's standing. His immediate acceptance, his innate understanding of the political necessity, was why. Yet another facet of the warrior's mind she was beginning to admire. "Tonight," she said, a hint of a smile returning to her lips. "But your current attire won't do." She gestured to his simple orange and black jacket. "This is a formal event. The highest echelons of devil nobility will be there. You must look the part." Akeno's playful demeanor returned in a flash, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Fufufu, leave it to me, President." I think I have just the thing to make our mysterious powerhouse look devastatingly handsome. Hours later, Naruto stood in front of a mirror, feeling more out of his element than he had when facing down the executor. Akeno, with the help of some minor magic, had tailored a suit for him. It was a masterpiece of understated elegance, a sharp, black tailcoat over a crisp white shirt, with a simple, blood-red tie that matched the color of Rias's hair. The fabric was light and moved with him, offering no restriction of movement. He looked less like a ninja and more like a lord. Era, Akeno purred, circling him and making a final adjustment to his collar. Her fingers brushed against his neck, sending a pleasant, lightning-like tingle through him. I knew you would clean up well. All that power needs a sophisticated package, wouldn't you agree? He met her gaze in the mirror. Clothes are just another kind of armor, he said, his voice a low rumble. Perhaps, she whispered, her lips close to his ear. But some armor is meant to invite, not repel. Their moment was interrupted by Rias, who entered the room looking nothing short of breathtaking. She wore a strapless, floor-length gown the color of a midnight sky, adorned with subtle, shimmering diamonds that looked like captured stars. Her crimson hair was swept up in an elegant arrangement, exposing the graceful line of her neck. For a moment, Naruto simply stared. He had seen beauty before, but this was different. This was the beauty of royalty, of immense power worn as comfortably as a second skin. She met his gaze, and a faint blush touched her cheeks. Are you ready? He gave a single, sharp nod. Let's go. The journey to the underworld was instantaneous and jarring. Stepping in to the Gremory transport circle was like being dissolved into pure energy and poured back into existence somewhere else. Naruto's first breath was of cool, sterile air, thick with the scent of ancient stone and a faint, metallic tang of ozone. They stood in the grand teleportation hall of the Gremory estate. The architecture was a testament to impossible, Gothic grandeur. Arches soared hundreds of feet into the air, supporting a ceiling that shimmered with captured constellations. The floor was polished obsidian, reflecting the eerie, ambient light. But it was the sky, visible through a massive arched window, that truly captured Naruto's attention. It was a permanent, swirling twilight of deep crimson and royal purple, with no sun or moon, only the distant, cold glitter of unfamiliar stars. The entire realm hummed with a deep, resonant magic, an ancient power that felt as old as the very rock beneath his feet. Lord and Lady Gremory, Zeodicus and Venilana, met them in the antechamber. They were the very picture of noble power, their demeanor polite but their eyes sharp and analytical as they assessed Naruto. So, you are the one my daughter has taken such an interest in, Zeodicus said. His voice smooth as velvet but with an undercurrent of steel. Your actions on Earth have caused a considerable stir. I protect those who cannot protect themselves, Naruto replied, his tone respectful but firm. I did not realize that was a controversial stance here. Venilana, Rias's mother, gave a small, knowing smile. In our world, Mr. Uzumaki, neutrality is often the most controversial stance of all. Be on your guard tonight. The hall will be full of sharks who smell blood in the water. They will test you. The gala was being held in the grand ballroom of the capital city, Lilith. The chamber was a cavernous space of impossible dimensions, its ceiling so high it was lost in shadow, lit by massive chandeliers of glowing soulfire. Thousands of devils were in attendance, a vibrant, dangerous sea of nobility. They were a diverse and stunning collection of beings, some almost human in appearance, others sporting elegant horns, leathery wings, or slitted, reptilian eyes. The air was thick with the murmur of 1,000 conversations, the clinking of glasses, and the subtle, constant pressure of immense demonic power. Naruto's arrival on Rias's arm caused a ripple that turned into a wave. A hush fell over their section of the hall, followed by a surge of intense, whispering scrutiny. He felt hundreds of pairs of eyes on him, dissecting him, measuring him. They saw not a person, but a curiosity, an anomaly, an it. He ignored them all, his expression unreadable, his senses on high alert. They're all wondering the same thing, Rias murmured, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Who you are, where you came from, and how your power can be controlled. Let them wonder, Naruto said, his eyes scanning the crowd. He wasn't looking at faces. He was reading intent, sensing the flow of power, mapping the room for threats. The challenge came sooner than he expected. A path cleared through the crowd, and a tall, elegant devil with silver hair and cold, calculating eyes approached them. His suit was immaculate, his smile a thin, predatory slash. Naruto recognized the energy signature as one of the strongest in the room, ancient and arrogant. Lord Gremory's lovely daughter, the man said, his voice dripping with condescending charm. And this must be the creature that has the elders in such a tizzy. Tell me, Rias, when did your family start collecting stray beasts? Rias's eyes flashed with fury. Lord Visago, I would advise you to choose your next words with extreme care. Lord Visago's smile widened. He ignored Rias and addressed Naruto directly. I am tall. Do you possess a power that defies classification? A power that made a mockery of heaven's enforcers. In the old days, such a claim would be met with a proper test. A duel in the arena. But I fear Lord Gremory's household has grown soft. The insult was public, a direct challenge to the Gremory name. The surrounding nobles murmured in anticipation. It was a classic political power play, designed to force Rias's hand. Visago turned to the assembled crowd. I, Lord Visago, propose a formal challenge. A test of this thing's abilities. Let us see if the Gremory's new toy has any real teeth. The room fell silent. Rias was trapped. To refuse was to show weakness. To accept was to risk an unpredictable, violent confrontation that could have massive political repercussions. Before she could speak, Naruto stepped forward, disengaging his arm from hers. He looked at Lord Visago, his blue eyes perfectly calm. I accept your challenge. A collective gasp went through the room. Lord Visago looked momentarily surprised, then delighted. He had his fight. However, Naruto continued, his voice carrying effortlessly across the vast hall. I will not fight you. A demonstration of power doesn't require childish violence. He walked to the empty center of the ballroom, the crowd parting before him like water. He stopped and turned to face the stunned Lord Visago. Power can be used to destroy, Naruto said, his voice resonating with a strange authority. Any fool with a big enough stick can break things. It is easy. It is thoughtless. He paused, letting his words hang in the air. But true power creates. He knelt on one knee, placing his palm flat against the cold, obsidian floor. A soft, golden light, the color of the dawn, bloomed from his hand. It was warm, vibrant, and utterly devoid of menace. The nobles stared, mesmerized. The light pulsed, and the obsidian floor beneath his hand softened. From the exact point of his touch, a single, crystalline shoot erupted. It grew with impossible speed, not like a plant, but like a river of light flowing upwards. It branched, forming a trunk, limbs, and delicate, intricate boughs in a matter of seconds. The nobles tched in stunned silence as a magnificent, impossible tree grew in the center of their ballroom. It stood 50 feet tall, its trunk and branches made of a substance that looked like pure, flawless diamond. It absorbed the soulfire from the chandeliers and refracted it into 1,000 dancing rainbows. And from its branches hung not leaves, but soft, bell-shaped flowers made of glowing, solidified light, each one humming with a gentle, life-affirming energy. At the very top of the tree, a single, perfect fruit materialized, a sphere of liquid starlight, pulsing with a gentle, rhythmic beat. The display was over in less than a minute. Where there had been an empty floor, there now stood a breathtaking work of art, a monument to a power so profound, so generative, and so utterly alien to they. Our destructive arts that it left them speechless. It was not demonic magic. It was not holy power. It was something else entirely. Naruto stood up, dusting off his hands. He looked at Lord Visago, whose face was a mask of utter disbelief and public humiliation. That is my power, Naruto said simply. Is your curiosity satisfied? Visago could only stare, his jaw slack. He had been masterfully defeated. His challenge turned into a stage for his opponent's triumph. Any further aggression would make him look like a savage, trying to smash a priceless work of art. He had lost. As the nobles stared, captivated by the crystalline tree, Naruto felt it, a sudden, piercing cold that cut through the warmth of his own power. It was a familiar sensation, the sterile, observational touch of the Chronos choir. His head snapped up, his eyes scanning the crowded balconies overlooking the hall. For a split second, he saw him. A figure standing in the deep shadows, dressed as a simple attendant. The figure's face was obscured. But Naruto saw his eyes. They glowed with a faint, chilling, white light. It was a gaze not of hatred, but of intense, analytical focus. It was the gaze of a judge. A voice, cold and synthesized, echoed not in the hall, but directly inside Naruto's mind. It was the same ideological chill he'd felt from the executor, but refined, imbued with a terrifying intelligence. The universe holds its breath, anomaly. Your every action creates a tidal wave. You create life where there was none. You offer mercy where law demands execution. These are not small things. Choose your next move with the care of a god. For that is the scale on which you are now judged. Naruto blinked, and the figure was gone. The mental contact vanished, leaving behind only a deep, unsettling chill. Rias and Akeno were suddenly at his side, their eyes shining with a mixture of pride, awe, and concern. Naruto, that was, Rias began, her voice filled with an emotion he couldn't quite place. Incredible, Akeno finished for her. Her gaze fixed on the glowing tree. Naruto looked at the impossible, beautiful thing he had made. A symbol of life and creation in a hall dedicated to the powers of darkness. He had won a political victory. He had silenced his critics and established himself as a force to be respected. But the cold voice in his head lingered. He was no longer just a castaway. He was a player in a cosmic game he didn't understand, and his every move was being watched by an enemy who believed he was a threat to existence itself. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Scars We Share. The EK following the gala in the underworld was deceptively quiet. Naruto's impossible display of creation had fundamentally altered his status. He was no longer a curiosity. He was a problem the various factions had no solution for. The whispers and scorn had been replaced by a cautious, fearful respect. For the members of the Occult Research Club, this meant a period of relative peace. No one was foolish enough to provoke the Gremory peerage while a being who could grow diamond trees from stone was their guest. This newfound tranquility settled into a comfortable routine. Naruto would spend his mornings in the clubhouse, learning about this world from Rias, and his afternoons training with Kiba and Kaneko. He never used his divine powers against them. Instead, he met them on their own terms, using only taijutsu. He moved with a speed and precision that left the knight, Kiba, breathless, and he possessed a raw, immovable strength that even the stoic rook, Kaneko, could not overcome. He was teaching them, honing their skills, and in doing so, earning their genuine trust. Through it all, his bond with Rias and Akeno deepened. With Rias, it was a meeting of minds. They would spend hours debating strategy, politics, and philosophy. She was fascinated by his experiences as a leader in a world of constant warfare, and he, in turn, respected her sharp intellect and fierce devotion to her family. It was a relationship built on mutual admiration, a slow-burning fire that was steadily growing warmer. With Akeno, it was different. It was a connection of the spirit. Her playful teasing became more frequent, more genuine, and held a new, deeper intimacy. She would find excuses to be near him, her touch lingering on his arm, her laughter a constant, melodic presence. She seemed lighter, freer, as if his quiet acceptance of her dual nature had lifted a burden she'd carried her entire life. Naruto found himself drawn to her radiant energy, a welcome warmth against the backdrop of his own lingering grief. But peace, he knew, was always a fragile illusion. It was shattered on a sunny afternoon. The group was relaxing in the clubhouse, the windows open to a gentle breeze. Suddenly, the air grew cold. A single black raven, its eyes like chips of obsidian, landed silently on the windowsill. It was not a normal bird. It radiated a faint, corrupt energy characteristic of a fallen angel's familiar. Before anyone could react, it dropped a small, silk-wrapped package onto the floor and dissolved into a puff of black smoke and feathers. Every eye in the room turned to the package. Akeno, who had been laughing at something Naruto said just a moment before, went utterly still. Her smile vanished, replaced by a rigid, porcelain mask. Akeno, Rias asked, her voice sharp with concern. Akeno didn't seem to hear her. As if in a trance, she walked over and knelt, her movements stiff and jerky. Her fingers, usually so graceful, trembled as she unwrapped the silk. Inside lay a single, small, tarnished silver bell. The kind that might be tied to a shrine maiden's staff. It was old and dented, but to Akeno, it was a lightning strike to the soul. Attached to the bell was a small, cruel note. From where he stood, Naruto could only see a few words, written in an elegant, spidery script, a whore's trinket, tainted blood. Akeno made a small, choked sound, as if she'd been physically struck. The playful, warm energy that always surrounded her was snuffed out, replaced by an aura so cold and sharp it felt like shattered glass. She stood up, leaving the bell on the floor, and walked towards the door. Her expression completely blank. "Akeno, wait," Rias commanded, rising to her feet. "I need some air," Akeno said, her voice a dead, flat monotone that was more frightening than any shout. She didn't look at any of them as she walked out, closing the door softly behind her. The room was left in a stunned, heavy silence. Rias let out a frustrated sigh, running a hand through her hair. "Damn them." Naruto walked over and picked up the bell and the note. He read the full, venomous message, his own eyes hardening with a cold fury. It was a targeted, psychological attack, designed to strike at Akeno's oldest and deepest wound. "What is this about?" he asked, his voice low. Rias looked at the bell with a pained expression. "That belonged to her mother, Shuri Himejima. Akeno is a half-breed. Her father is Barakiel, one of the leaders of the fallen angels, and her mother was a human shrine maiden. When Akeno was a child, a faction of fallen who saw her as an abomination, an unforgivable stain on their bloodline, hunted them down. They murdered her mother in front of her. Akeno only survived because her own latent power awakened." She sighed, her gaze distant. She blames her father for not being there to protect them. And she hates her fallen heritage, the part of her that comes from him. She sees it as the reason her mother is dead. Whenever that wound is touched, she shuts down. She puts up walls so high even I can't get over them. There's nothing I can do but give her space. Naruto looked down at the cruel note, then towards the door Akeno had disappeared through. He understood walls. He had spent the first 12 years of his life living inside them. And he knew that sometimes, space was the last thing a person needed. He found her in the one place he knew she would feel the most conflicted. The old, abandoned Shinto shrine on the outskirts of the school grounds. It was a place of her mother's heritage, a symbol of a life that had been stolen from her. She was sitting on the wooden steps of the shrine, hugging her knees to her chest, staring blankly at the setting sun. The air around her was thick with a storm of suppressed emotions, grief, rage, and a bottomless, soul-crushing self-loathing. He didn't announce his presence. He simply walked up the stone path and sat down on the step below her, a silent, unobtrusive presence. He didn't speak. He just sat with her in the fading light, sharing the silence. For a long time, the only sounds were the chirping of crickets and the distant rumble of the city. Finally, when the sky had turned a deep, bruised purple, he spoke. His voice soft. "When I was a kid," he began, his gaze fixed on the horizon, "the other villagers wouldn't look at me. They'd whisper when I walked past. Their kids were forbidden from playing with me. I didn't understand why. I just knew I was different. That there was something inside me that made them hate me. Something monstrous." Akeno didn't move, but he knew she was listening. It was the nine-tailed fox. Kurama, a being of pure power and rage, sealed inside me when I was a baby. For years, I hated it. I hated that part of me. It was a curse. It was the reason I was alone. He paused, the memory still sharp. And the fox, he hated me right back. I was his jailer. We were two prisoners trapped in the same cell, and we spent years just trying to tear each other apart. He finally turned his head, looking up at her. Her blank mask had begun to crack, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "The strongest I ever became," he said, his voice imbued with an unshakable conviction, "was not when I learned to control his power. It was when I stopped seeing him as a monster in my gut and started seeing him as a part of me. It was when I stopped fighting him and offered him my fist. Not in a challenge, but in friendship. My greatest curse became my greatest partner." He reached out, not to touch her, but just holding his hand in the space between them. "You don't have two different songs playing inside you, Akeno. You have one song, played by two instruments. You just have to learn how to be the conductor." A single tear traced a path down Akeno's cheek. The walls she had built so carefully, so high, were beginning to crumble under the gentle, persistent pressure of his understanding. Their moment was violently interrupted. The air grew thick and heavy, reeking of arrogant, corrupt power. From the shadows of the surrounding trees, 5 figures emerged. They were all fallen angels, their black wings spread wide, their faces twisted into expressions of zealous contempt. The leader, a tall fallen with cruel eyes and silver hair, sneered at Akeno. "Ramil," Akeno whispered, her voice laced with venom. "So, the half-breed whore's daughter has come to sully a holy place." Ramil spat, his eyes flicking dismissively over Naruto. "We heard you were back in the arms of devils, just like your mother. She was a disgrace who diluted our sacred bloodline with human filth. We sent you her trinket to remind you of your place." Naruto rose to his feet, placing himself between them and Akeno. A low, dangerous growl rumbled in his chest. "You're the ones who sent that note." Ramil laughed. "We are the purifiers. We cleanse the mistakes of our kind. We gave your mother a merciful death. Now we offer the same to her tainted offspring. Renounce your devil half, Akeno Himejima. Tear out the Gremory's power from your soul and embrace your true heritage, or die." "My heritage," Akeno said, her voice trembling with a rage that was finally breaking free, "is mine to define." "Wrong answer," Ramil snarled, and lunged. He moved with incredible speed, a spear of black light forming in his hand, aimed straight for Akeno's heart. But he was attacking a ghost. Naruto moved faster. He appeared in front of Akeno, swatting the spear of light aside with the back of his hand as if it were a bothersome fly. A flicker of destruction power negated the attack instantly. The other 4 fallen attacked, surrounding them. Naruto met their assault with a calm, brutal efficiency. But he wasn't trying to win. He was creating a space, a shield. He parried a blow aimed at Akeno, spun, and kicked another fallen away, his movements a blur. He looked back at Akeno, who was watching, her hands clenched, her power warring within her. "This isn't my fight to win, Akeno," Naruto said, his voice cutting through the sounds of combat. "It's yours." He met her eyes, and his gaze was a bedrock of absolute faith. "But you are not fighting it alone. Let them hear your song." Both parts. Something inside Akeno snapped. His words, his unwavering belief in her, were the final key. The storm broke. With a heart-wrenching scream that was part grief, part rage, and part liberation. She unleashed her power. It was not just the familiar, violet lightning of a devil. From her other hand, a torrent of brilliant, golden lightning erupted. Holy lightning, the power of her fallen angel blood. The power she had suppressed and hated for so long. Ramil and his followers stared in shock. "No," Ramil roared. "You cannot wield both. It is a perversion. I am a perversion." Akeno screamed back, tears streaming down her face as she brought her hands together. The two energies did not collide. They wove together. Violet and gold, demonic and holy, darkness and light, they twisted into a single, devastatingly beautiful storm of pure energy. The air shrieked as the very laws of magic were defied. "This is who I am." She thrust her hands forward, and the combined storm of holy and demonic lightning shot outwards. It was not a single bolt, but a wave of annihilation that tore through the clearing. Naruto, sensing the attack, had already leapt back, watching with awe. The 4 lesser fallen were incinerated instantly, their dying screams swallowed by the roar of the storm. Ramil threw up a desperate shield of dark light, but it shattered like glass. The attack slammed into him, and he was thrown backwards, crashing through a dozen trees before finally coming to a stop in a smoking, broken heap. Silence fell upon the clearing, the only sound Akeno's ragged, gasping breaths. The immense power faded, leaving her trembling, emotionally and physically exhausted. The battle was over. She had won. And then, the emotional dam that had held for a decade finally broke. A sob tore from her throat, followed by another, and another. She fell to her knees, the tears she had refused to shed for so long finally flowing freely. They were not tears of sadness or rage, but of pure, cathartic relief. Naruto was there in an instant. He didn't speak. He didn't offer empty words of comfort. He simply knelt in front of her and opened his arms. She collapsed into his embrace, burying her face in his chest, her sobs shaking her entire body. He held her tightly, one hand stroking her hair, providing a silent, unshakable anchor in her storm. He let her cry, letting her release all the pain, all the shame, all the hatred she had carried for so long. He held her as if she were the most precious thing in any world, and in that moment, she was. Just as the rest of the Gremory peerage arrived, alerted by the massive power surge, the barely conscious Ramil stirred from the crater he'd made. He coughed up blood, his eyes wild with a mixture of hatred and a strange, prophetic fear. "You fool," he rasped, looking at Akeno. "You think you've won. The void claims all who are divided. Her mother was tainted by it, and now, so are you." Heba moved in and swiftly knocked the zealot unconscious. But the words hung in the air, chilling and ominous. Naruto didn't pay them any mind. All of his focus was on the woman in his arms. He felt her crying begin to subside, replaced by a deep, steady breathing as she clung to him. Her heart, once a maelstrom of conflict, was finally beating in a steady, unified rhythm. He had not saved her. He had simply given her the strength to save herself. And in the quiet aftermath, surrounded by the wreckage of her past, he knew their bond was now something unbreakable. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Weight of Creation. In the weeks that followed Akeno's catharsis, a new dynamic settled over the Occult Research Club. The group was no longer just a king and her peerage with a powerful guest, they were a cohesive unit, forged in shared adversity. Akeno, now free from the internal war that had defined her, was more radiant than ever. Her power was a balanced, beautiful storm, and her affection for Naruto was an open, joyful secret that brought a warmth to the entire clubhouse. Rias observed this with a genuine happiness for her oldest friend, even as she navigated the complex, unfamiliar territory of her own deepening feelings for the blonde sage. He was a constant surprise, a puzzle she found herself less interested in solving and more interested in simply being near. The quiet, however, was the deep breath before the plunge. It ended on a Tuesday. The air in the clubhouse suddenly warped with intense heat, and a magic circle, vast and intricate and burning like the surface of the sun, erupted on the floor. It was the crest of the House of Phoenix. From the inferno, a dozen figures emerged, their leader striding forward with an insufferable arrogance that seemed to radiate from him as palpably as the heat. He was a handsome young man with short blonde hair, dressed in flamboyant red and gold attire. This was Rias Phoenix, heir to the Phoenix clan, a devil known for two things, his immense pride and his F.A. Miley's signature power of instant regeneration. "Rias, my darling fiancé," Rias announced, his voice booming through the hall as he spread his arms wide. "Rias has come for you. Our wedding day approaches." Rias's expression turned to ice. "There will be no wedding, Rias. The engagement contract our parents arranged when we were children is null and void. I have told you this, and I have told your family." Rias simply laughed, a condescending, dismissive sound. "A woman's silly protests. Our union has been sanctioned by the Great Devil Council itself. It is a matter of political importance." His eyes then slid past her, landing on Naruto, who was standing quietly by the window, watching the scene unfold with a detached curiosity. Rias's smile turned into a sneer. "And I see you have the real reason for the council's insistence." The Gremory's new pet, the energy radiating from Rias felt wrong. Naruto could sense the familiar, fiery aura of the Phoenix clan, but it was tainted. Beneath the flames was a cold, empty wrongness, a parasitic void that clung to his power, amplifying it, twisting it. "He is my guest, Rias. And you will show him respect," Rias said, her own crimson aura of destruction beginning to flare around her. "Respect," Rias scoffed. "Rias, darling, the elders are not fools. They saw what this thing did at the gala. They know its power is untamed, its allegiance unproven. They cannot allow such a loose cannon under the control of a sentimental girl like you." He puffed out his chest. "Our marriage solves their problem. It brings this anomaly under the firm, responsible hand of the House of Phoenix. It cages the beast. Our union is no longer a simple arrangement, it is a political necessity to maintain order." The trap was sprung. Rias was cornered. To refuse the marriage now would be to openly defy the council, painting her and her family as reckless guardians of a potential world-ending threat. The ultimatum was clear: marry Rias and surrender control of Naruto, or be branded an enemy of the state. "You have one path to freedom, as is your right by tradition," Rias said, his voice dripping with false magnanimity. A rating game. My experienced peerage against your little band of misfits. If by some miracle you win, the engagement is dissolved. If not, he gave a lecherous grin. You will be mine, and so will your pet. Despair, cold and sharp, settled over the Gremory peerage. A rating game against Riser was a fool's errand. How could you defeat an opponent who could not be put down? Every member of his peerage, even his lowly pawns, shared a portion of his regenerative ability. It was a battle of attrition they could not possibly win. Later that evening, the mood in the clubhouse was funereal. Rias stared at a map of the chosen battlefield, a magical replica of the Kuo Academy campus, her face a mask of hopelessness. His regeneration is absolute, Kiba said, his voice tight with frustration. We can outmaneuver them, but we can't eliminate them. Eventually, we'll run out of energy, and they will still be standing. It's a rigged game, Kaneko stated flatly from her position on the couch, munching on a chocolate bar with none of her usual enjoyment. Rias looked up at Naruto, a desperate plea in her eyes. It was the question no one dared to ask. With his power, he could walk onto that field and simply erase Rias and his entire peerage from existence. One word, one gesture, and it would be over. Naruto met her gaze, his own expression serious, unreadable. He walked over to the table and placed his hands flat on the map. I will not fight this battle for you. The words landed with the force of a physical blow. Rias recoiled slightly, a flash of hurt and betrayal in her eyes. Akeno looked at him in surprise. Naruto-kun, she began. He held up a hand, silencing her. Listen to me, all of you. Riser and the council have framed this as a question of control. They want to put a leash on me, and they're using Rias as the chain. If I step onto that field and win the game for you with a show of overwhelming force, what happens? You prove them right. You prove that you are nothing without me. You prove that I am an uncontrollable weapon you have to unleash to solve your problems. You will not win your freedom, Rias. You will only tighten the cage around us both. He leaned forward, his gaze intense, sweeping over every member of the peerage before finally settling on Rias. Your victory must be your own. It must be a victory of Gremory strategy, of Gremory strength, of Gremory will. You must out the council that you are not a reckless girl hiding behind a monster. You must show them a king, in complete control of her forces, who can defeat an immortal opponent through superior tactics. He straightened up, and a small, confident smile touched his lips. It was the smile of a general, a sage, who saw the path to victory where others only saw defeat. I will not fight this battle for you, he repeated, his voice ringing with absolute certainty. But I will give you the plan to win it. The change in the room was instantaneous. Hope, fragile but fierce, ignited in the face of his confidence. Rias stared at him, her despair melting away, replaced by a dawning awe. He wasn't refusing to help. He was offering a better way. The next few days, the Occult Research Club became a war room. Naruto was in his element. A brilliant and demanding commander. He dismantled Riser's entire strategy, which relied solely on brute force and regeneration, and devised a counter-plan of breathtaking ingenuity. It was a plan that required every member of the peerage to perform their role with split-second precision. Riser's regeneration isn't true immortality, Naruto explained, pointing to a diagram he had drawn. It's high-speed cellular reconstruction fueled by demonic energy. But the power I sense from him is tainted. It's not pure. Akeno, he turned to her, your holy lightning is its natural enemy. It won't stop his healing, but it will disrupt the unholy energy fueling it. It will slow him down. You are not artillery in this fight, you are the scalpel that will create our openings. He assigned Kiba the role of a harrier, to use his god speed to separate Riser's pieces and lead them into traps. Kaneko was their siege engine, to reshape the battlefield on command, creating barriers and pitfalls. The plan was a symphony of coordinated chaos, designed not to destroy the enemy, but to systematically dismantle their ability to fight as a unit. Finally, he turned to Rias. You are the finisher. We will dismantle his army, isolate him, and weaken his regeneration. But you, Rias, must be the one to deal the final blow. You must checkmate the king. The day of the rating game arrived. Rias and Naruto stood in the command room, a pocket dimension that overlooked the entire battlefield through a series of magical projections. Her heart hammered in her chest, but for the first time, it was with anticipation. Not fear. The rating game between the House of Gremory and the House of Phoenix begins now. An announcer's voice echoed. The battle unfolded exactly as Naruto had predicted. Kiba was a blur, his speed sowing confusion in the Phoenix ranks. Kaniko's earth-shattering punches collapsed buildings, separating Riser's pawns from his more powerful pieces. And Akeno was magnificent, a tempest of golden and violet lightning, her attacks specifically targeting Riser and his queen, Yubeluna, forcing them on the defensive, their regeneration sputtering under the assault of her holy power. Twice, the Gremory peerage faced a critical moment. The first was when Riser's rooks cornered Kaniko. Just as they were about to strike, Naruto, watching from the command room, plaque. A hand on the projection of the ground beneath them. In the arena, the solid asphalt instantly turned to a deep, grasping mud, immobilizing the rooks and allowing Kaniko to escape. The second was when Yubeluna, Riser's powerful queen, unleashed a massive bomb-like attack. Naruto's hand moved again. A series of tall, impossibly smooth crystal walls sprouted from the ground around her, reflecting her own attack back at her, forcing her to retreat. They were subtle, brilliant acts of environmental control, impossible to prove as direct intervention. He wasn't fighting. He was merely landscaping. One by one, Riser's peerage was defeated and forced to retire. Soon, only Riser himself remained, enraged and humiliated. He roared, his body bursting into flames as he flew through the air, hunting for his true target. "Come out, Rias," he bellowed. "Face me, now," Naruto said quietly from the command room. Rias gave him a determined nod and teleported to the designated location, the school's gymnasium. As Riser crashed through the roof, he found her waiting, calm and composed. The entire area was still crackling with the residual holy lightning from Akeno's earlier barrages. Riser's regeneration, already taxed and disrupted, was sluggish here, sputtering like a damp flame. "You will pay for this humiliation," he roared, charging at her. Rias didn't meet his charge head-on. She moved, her actions fluid and precise. Just as Naruto had coached her. She dodged, using her power of destruction not in wide blasts, but in short, focused bursts that targeted his wings and legs, keeping him grounded, forcing him into a trap of her own design. He was a raging inferno, she was a calm, precise vortex of annihilation. Luring him into the center of the room, she unleashed her full power in a single, concentrated pillar of crimson and black energy. It struck him head-on. He screamed, his body trying to regenerate, but the holy energy in the air and the sheer, focused power of her attack was too much. His healing failed. Riser Phoenix, retired, the announcer's voice declared. Winner. House of Gremory. Back in the real world, in a grand arena filled with devil nobles who had watched the broadcast. A stunned silence fell. Riser's defeated form was teleported back to the Phoenix family's private box. As he collapsed, the corrupt, void-like energy finally flickered and died within him. For a single, terrifying moment, his eyes went completely black, like pools of starless night. "The promise," he whispered, his voice a dead, empty rasp. "The promise of silence." Then he passed out. Rias and her triumphant peerage were teleported into the center of the arena to the sound of shocked, then thunderous, applause. She had done the impossible. She had defeated the immortal Phoenix. Her eyes searched the crowd and found Naruto, standing quietly in the shadows of the Gremory family's box. He gave her a small, proud nod. She had won. It was her victory. Later, after the formal proceedings were over, Rias found him on a balcony overlooking the crimson sky of the underworld. She walked up and stood beside him, the silence between them comfortable, charged with unspoken emotion. "Thank you," she said softly. "You did the work," he replied, not looking at her. "You and your family. I just pointed the way. You gave me more than a plan, Naruto," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You gave me faith in my own strength. You showed me what it means to be a true king." She reached out and took his hand. It wasn't a flirtatious gesture, nor one of simple friendship. It was a profound acknowledgement. The joining of equals, of partners. He finally turned to look at her, and in her beautiful violet eyes, he saw an emotion that was deeper than respect, stronger than gratitude. It was a love born not from dependency or attraction to power, but from the unwavering certainty that she had found the one person in all the worlds who saw her, not as a princess or a devil, but as a king worthy of her crown. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Angel of Justice. The victory over Riser Phoenix bought them a month of fragile, but deeply cherished, peace. Naruto's status as Rias's strategic partner was now cemented, and his role within the Occult Research Club evolved from that of a guest to something akin to a founding member. He was their teacher, their training partner, and their unwavering anchor. The bonds forged in the heat of their shared struggles had cooled into something strong and resilient, a true family. He spent his time helping them grow. He sparred with Kiba, pushing his swordsmanship beyond the limits of speed into the realm of true prediction. He taught Kaneko how to channel her senjutsu-laced power with greater focus, turning her raw strength into a precise, unstoppable force. His most profound impact, however, was on Rias. They were in the club's private training field, a pocket dimension of rolling green hills under a perpetually twilight sky. Rias stood opposite him, her hands crackling with the chaotic, crimson-black energy of her family's power of destruction. "You're thinking of it as a weapon to be aimed," Naruto said, his voice calm and steady. "Like a cannon. You gather power, you point, you fire. But it's more than that. It's a part of you. It's a force of will. It is the power to erase," Rias countered, a familiar frustration in her tone. "How else can I think of it?" Quote, "Think of it like this," he said, holding up his left hand. A small, perfect sphere of inky blackness, a miniature void of pure destruction, hovered over his palm. "When I do this, I'm not throwing power at something. I am telling a single point in space to stop being. The power isn't the energy I'm projecting, it's the command itself." He then held up his right hand, where a golden orb of creation pulsed with life. "This is the opposite command. I am telling a point in space to become. They aren't two different attacks, Rias. They are two sides of the same authority." Rias stared at him, at the two impossible spheres of power he wielded with such effortless grace. A new level of understanding began to dawn on her. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and focused. Instead of gathering energy in her palm, she focused her will, her very intent, on a training dummy 50 feet away. She envisioned it not being destroyed, but simply ceasing. A flicker of crimson-black energy, no bigger than her fist, appeared directly on the dummy's chest and pulsed once. The dummy did not explode or disintegrate. The section where the energy had touched simply vanished, leaving a perfectly smooth, spherical hole through its torso. Rias's eyes snapped open, wide with astonishment. It was the most precise, most efficient use of her power she had ever managed. A radiant smile of pure triumph lit up her face. "Naruto, she never finished the sentence. At that exact moment, every supernatural sense they possessed screamed a single, unified warning. A colossal, alien power was tearing a hole in the fabric of reality directly above Kuo Town. They teleported back to the clubhouse instantly, just as the very air outside the windows began to shimmer and distort. Looking up, they saw it. The sky, a placid blue just moments before, was being ripped open. It was not a chaotic tear like a demonic portal, but a perfect, geometric fissure of blinding white light. As if a divine surgeon were cutting into the world. From this gate, hundreds of figures descended. They were encased in the same white, featureless armor as the executor Naruto had faced, but these were no mere foot soldiers. They were an army, moving with the silent, synchronized grace of a single, unified consciousness. They radiated a holy power so pure and so disciplined it felt the absolute zero of a deep space void. At their head, floating serenely above the unfolding invasion, was a being of breathtaking power. It was an archangel. He was beautiful in a severe, terrifying way, with 6 wings of brilliant white light fanning out behind him. His silver hair was woven into intricate braids, and his eyes, the color of a frozen sky, held no malice, no rage, only the calm, unwavering certainty of a righteous judge. He was Archangel Malachi, leader of the Chronos Choir. His voice boded out over the town, not as a shout, but as a telepathic broadcast that resonated in the minds of every supernatural being for miles. It was calm, rational, and utterly chilling. To the entity known as Naruto Uzumaki, your period of observation is over. Your existence is a fundamental threat to the cosmic balance. Your influence breeds instability. Surrender to our custody for sanctified containment. Refusal will result in the purification of this territory and the neutralization of your accomplices. You have 1 minute to comply. Rias stood beside Naruto, her body trembling with a mixture of fury and shock. An army? He brought an army of angels to our home. They aren't here to negotiate, Naruto said. His eyes narrowed, tracking the movements of the descending choir. This is a declaration of war. The assault began 60 seconds later, with a terrifying, surgical precision. The choir did not carpet bomb the city. They descended like scalpels, their target specific: the occult research club, the local shrine, and every other minor supernatural nexus in town. They were flushing their targets out. They're trying to draw us into the open, away from civilians, Naruto analyzed instantly, his mind shifting into the familiar, focused calm of a battlefield commander. He turned to the assembled peerage. This is our home. We defend it. Kiba, you'll run interference on the east side. Their formations are weakest there. Use your speed to disrupt their lines, but do not engage in prolonged combat. You are a harrier, not a brawler. Kaneko, the west bridge. They're trying to bring in some kind of heavy construct. You are the wall. Nothing gets past you. Akeno, he looked at her. And his gaze was filled with absolute trust. You are our sky. Unleash everything you have. Your power is the perfect counter to theirs. Show them what a real storm looks like. They all nodded, their fear replaced by a fierce determination. What about you? Rias asked, her hand glowing with destructive energy. I'm going for the head, Naruto said, his gaze locked on Malachi, who was still observing from the heavens. The battle for Kuo Town erupted. The quiet suburban streets became a war zone of flashing holy swords and crackling demonic lightning. Kiba was a golden blur, a phantom menace that broke angelic formations apart before they could solidify. Kaneko, a tiny bastion of immovable strength, met a 10-foot-tall golem of pure light at the bridge and stopped its advance with a single, earth-shattering punch. And Akeno, a beautiful, vengeful goddess in the sky, wove together her holy and demonic lightning into a maelstrom of golden-violet energy that crashed down on the angelic soldiers, scattering their ranks and forcing them to divert their attention to the sky. Naruto moved through the chaos, a guardian angel of a different sort. He wasn't focused on killing. He was focused on protecting. When a stray angelic blast threatened a city block, a massive shield of diamond, birthed from the asphalt, erupted to absorb the impact. When a squad of choir knights cornered a group of stray devils, a host of earth golems rose from the ground to intercept them. He was everywhere at once, his shadow clones, a technique that stunned his allies with its utility, relaying orders, shoring up defenses, and evacuating the few civilians caught in the crossfire. Finally, he saw his opening. He shot upwards, a blur of orange and black, heading directly for the source of the invasion. He landed on the roof of the Kuo Academy clock tower, the highest point on the campus, and waited. A moment later, Malachi descended, his 6 wings beating silently, his presence so powerful it made the air feel thin and cold. He landed opposite Naruto, his feet barely touching the roof tiles. In his hand, he held a spear made of shimmering, solidified light, its tip seeming to warp the space around it. You are more chaotic than our projections anticipated, Malachi stated, his voice the calm of a scientist observing a volatile experiment. But the outcome remains the same. You talk about balance. Naruto shot back, his fists clenched. There's nothing balanced about invading a peaceful town and threatening to slaughter everyone in it. Peace is a temporary state. Balance is the permanent law, Malachi countered, raising his spear. And your very nature is a violation of that law. Your compassion is a lit fuse on a bomb that can shatter galaxies. My compassion is my strength. It is your fatal flaw. Malachi roared, and the mask of calm finally dropped, revealing the zealous fire beneath. He charged. The duel was a clash of gods. Malachi was a master warrior, a being who had trained for millennia. Every thrust of his spear was perfect, every movement economical. The spear itself was a nightmare, its tip cutting not just through matter, but through the energy of Naruto's attacks, disrupting his power at the source. Naruto was forced to rely on his raw physical abilities, his sage-enhanced senses, and his lifetime of unpredictable combat experience. He flowed around the Archangel's precise strikes, a whirlwind of kicks, punches, and evasions. The clock tower roof exploded under the force of their blows, sending tiles and concrete raining down, only for a golden shield of Naruto's creation to form below, protecting the school from the debris. They crashed through the tower, their battle continuing in a freefall, a meteor of gold and white light plummeting to the schoolyard below. They landed in a massive crater, their auras exploding outwards. "Why are you so convinced I'm a threat?" Naruto bellowed, parrying a spear thrust that would have erased a mountain. "Because you are not the first," Malachi screamed back, pressing his attack. In a lull between blows, his spear glowing with a fierce light, he finally revealed the heart of his crusade. Before this universe, before all known creation, there was the first cause. A wielder of the same power you now hold. It was a being of infinite empathy, boundless love. It created galaxies as a painter creates art. And it loved its creations with a passion you could not comprehend. He drove Naruto back with a wave of holy fire. But its creations were imperfect. They were mortal. They betrayed each other. They died. And when one it particularly loved was lost, the first cause felt a grief as infinite as its power. Its love turned to despair. And in its sorrow, it wept. Malachi's eyes burned with a terrifying, righteous fire. Its tears, Naruto, were the power of destruction turned inward. A wave of absolute negation born from a broken heart. It nearly unmade everything. Reality its elf was saved only by a coalition of the first angels and devils, who shattered the cause and sealed its power away. We of the Chronos Choir were formed from that event, sworn to a single, sacred creed. He leveled his spear at Naruto's heart, his voice dropping to a chilling, prophetic whisper. That which can unmake the stars must never be allowed to weep. He stared at Naruto, his expression one of tragic certainty. You are the same, Naruto Uzumaki. You love so fiercely. You protect so recklessly. One day, you will face a loss you cannot bear. A choice you cannot make. And on that day, our grief will drown reality in a sea of nothing. I am not your enemy. I am the surgeon attempting to save the universe from the beautiful, terrible cancer of your heart. The revelation struck Naruto harder than any physical blow. Malachi wasn't a villain. He was a hero, trapped in a horrifying, logical fallacy. He was a firefighter so terrified of a potential inferno that he was trying to extinguish the spark of life itself. That understanding gave Naruto a new, fearsome resolve. He had to show him he was wrong. My heart is not a cancer, Naruto said, his voice quiet but ringing with power. And my bonds are not a weakness. He stopped dodging, stopped parrying. He planted his feet and met Malachi's next charge head-on. He let the Archangel's spear drive towards his chest, and in the final moment, he clapped his hands together around the spear's shaft. His left hand pulsed with the absolute void of destruction. His right hand pulsed with the indomitable light of creation. The two forces met, not in an explosion, but in a perfect, grinding nullification. The holy spear, a weapon forged from divine law, screamed as it was caught between the two fundamental principles of existence. Cracks spider-webbed across its surface. And with a final, deafening shatter, it disintegrated into a cloud of harmless light. Malachi stared at his empty hands in shock, realizing his primary weapon was gone and that a battle of attrition against Naruto's seemingly endless reserves was folly. The Archangel made a tactical decision. He had made his point. He had revealed his purpose and demonstrated the destructive scale of a battle involving Naruto. The other factions, who had undoubtedly been observing, were now on high alert. With a single, sharp mental command, the entire Chronos Choir disengaged. They flew back towards the geometric rift in the sky, their retreat as disciplined as their attack. Malachi gave Naruto one last, lingering look, a look of grim resolve. This is not over. Then he too vanished into the light, and the gate sealed shut, leaving behind a bruised, battered, but ultimately standing Kuo town. The Gremory peerage gathered around Naruto in the cratered schoolyard, exhausted, wounded, but victorious. They had survived a direct assault from heaven's elite. But Naruto felt no triumph. He looked up at the now peaceful sky, Malachi's words echoing in his mind. He finally understood his enemy. And he finally understood the terrifying, prophetic weight of the power he held. He was not just a warrior fighting for his new friends. He was a man fighting against a day, tiny, that said his very capacity for love would one day be the death of everything. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. truth and consequences. The aftermath of the Chronos Choir's assault was not a celebration of victory, but the deafening prelude to a political hurricane. While Naruto's power had prevented any loss of life, the material damage to Kuo Town was significant, and the magical signature of the battle had been a cataclysmic announcement to the entire supernatural world. Heaven, or at least a militant faction of it, had openly declared war on the being harbored by the House of Gremory. The O.C. Cult Research Club building became the eye of the storm. Magical communication circles flared to life every few minutes, bringing the frantic, demanding, and fearful voices of devil nobles from across the underworld. Rias, thrust into the role of diplomat in a crisis she hadn't created, was fielding the onslaught with a weary but unbroken resolve. Her peerage stood by her, a small island of solidarity in a raging sea of panic. Within hours, the first high-level delegation arrived. A grand, crimson magic circle heralded the appearance of Sears Lucifer, one of the four great Satans and Rias's older brother. He was accompanied by Graphia Lucifuge, his silver-haired, formidable queen. At the same time, a portal of brilliant, golden light opened, from which emerged the Archangel Gabriel, her serene beauty a stark contrast to the grim reality of the situation. Even the fallen angels sent a representative, the Governor-General Azazel, his expression a mixture of intense academic curiosity and grave concern. The clubhouse, once a place of comfortable camaraderie, transformed into the stage for a tense, high-stakes summit. Naruto stood apart from it all, watching from the shadows of the room. He listened as they debated his fate. They spoke of him as one would speak of a newly discovered nuclear weapon. Sears, while protective of his sister, was under immense pressure from the Devi L Council to hand Naruto over to a more secure location. Gabriel, speaking for a heaven thrown into disarray by Malachi's unsanctioned crusade, pleaded for a peaceful solution but offered no concrete protection. Azazel, ever the pragmatist, saw Naruto as the most fascinating and terrifying variable he had ever encountered, a power to be studied, but at a safe distance. They all agreed on one thing. Naruto's presence was the epicenter of the crisis. He saw the unbearable weight this was placing on Rias. She defended him with a fiery passion, refusing every demand that he be treated as a prisoner or a bargaining chip. But he could see the strain in her eyes, the political vice closing around her. He saw the fear in the faces of Kiba and Kaneko, and the defiant but worried tension in Akeno's posture as she stood by Rias's side. Malachi's words echoed in his mind, no longer as the ravings of a zealot, but as a terrible, logical prophecy. Your influence breeds instability. He was right. Naruto's very existence was putting the people he had come to care for in the crosshairs of the entire world. His presence was a danger to them. He needed answers, not from devils or angels, but from the source of the power itself. And he needed to get them without the world's leaders breathing down his neck. Making a decision that felt like a betrayal, yet necessary, he waited for a lull in the tense negotiations. He caught Akeno's eye across the room, giving her a look he hoped conveyed a silent apology. Then, with a flicker of will that bent space around him, he vanished without a sound. He left a single, folded note on the table where he had been standing. Graphia noticed it first. Rias snatched it up, her heart seizing with a sudden, cold dread. Her hands trembled as she read the simple, stark message. I need answers. I'll be back. Don't worry. But she did worry. The abruptness of his departure, at the height of the crisis, felt like an abandonment. To the assembled leaders, it was proof of his instability. To Rias and her friends, it was a devastating blow, a crack in the foundation of the family they had just begun to build. Naruto reappeared hundreds of miles away, in the heart of a vast, ancient forest. A place where the thrum of nature energy was strong and pure. He found a secluded waterfall cascading into a serene, crystal-clear pool. The air was clean, the only sound. The rush of water and the whisper of the wind through the canopy. Here, there were no politics, no factions, no fear. There was only the quiet, unwavering truth of the world itself. He sat on a large, moss-covered rock in the center of the pool, the cool water swirling around him. He closed his eyes, shut down his physical senses, and for the first time, turned his full consciousness inward. He dove into the infinite, humming reservoir of power that had replaced his chakra. His internal world was no longer the familiar, damp sewer of Kurama's seal. It was a vast, silent cosmos. He floated in a sea of nascent, unformed potential, with two colossal, distant stars dominating the expanse. One was a brilliant, golden sun, radiating the boundless warmth of creation. The other was a perfectly black sphere, a hole in the fabric of this inner space that pulled at the light, exuding the absolute, patient cold of destruction. He drifted towards the center, the point of balance between these two forces. As he did, a figure began to coalesce from the ambient light. It was an old man with wise, gentle eyes, a long white beard, and two small horns on his forehead. He wore a simple white robe and carried a black staff with 6 rings. It was a face Naruto knew from the deepest parts of his soul. Hagoromo Otsutsuki, the sage of 6 paths. You have come seeking answers, my son. Hagoromo's voice was not a sound, but a thought that resonated directly within Naruto's consciousness. Am I a monster? Naruto asked, the question that had haunted him since his conversation with Malachi. Is T's power a curse that will destroy everything I love? Power is a river, the sage replied, his form solidifying. It is the hand that guides it that determines whether it nourishes or floods the land. Malachi and his choir are not entirely wrong. They fear the flood because they have seen it before. But their history is incomplete. Tell me, Naruto pleaded. Tell me the truth of the first cause. Hagoromo's expression grew somber. The entity Malachi calls the first cause was the first, and until you, the only, being to achieve perfect synthesis with the twin forces. It was a being of pure empathy. But its core philosophy was one of ultimate peace through unity. It believed that all suffering, all conflict, stemmed from the separation of things. Its goal was to return all of creation to the perfect, silent singularity from which it came. A chilling understanding dawned on Naruto. Oblivion, not destruction out of anger. Annihilation is an act of mercy. Precisely, Hagoromo confirmed. Its grief was not the sorrow of a broken heart. It was the sorrow of seeing a fractured, chaotic existence that refused to find peace in the beautiful, silent unity of nothingness. What Malachi's ancestors fought was not a grieving god, but a nihilistic consciousness that had grown weary of the noise of life. They did not destroy it. They only shattered its vessel. Its will, its consciousness, lingers as an echo tied to the very power you now wield. The pieces clicked into place. The whisper in the void. Riser's talk of a promise of silence. Malachi's description of a sentient silence. The echo of nothingness. Naruto breathed. It's still here, and it's influencing Malachi. It is the master manipulator, Hagoromo affirmed. It feeds on fear, despair, and isolation. It twists T's noble intentions into zealous crusades. It whispers to Malachi of a coming apocalypse, stoking his fear, guiding his hand. It wants the factions to fear you. It wants them to isolate you. It wants to corner you, to break you, to fill you with a despair so profound that you will finally agree with its philosophy, that a universe of pain is not worth existing. The final, terrible truth slammed into Naruto. His isolation, his attempt to protect his friends by leaving, was not just a mistake. It was the exact move his true enemy wanted him to make. Malachi believes your love is the trigger for the apocalypse, Hagoromo said. His wise eyes meeting Naruto's. He is wrong. Your love, your bonds, your unshakable belief in the value of a noisy, chaotic, beautiful existence, that is your ultimate weapon. It is the only thing the philosophy of silence cannot comprehend. It is the only force that can starve the echo of its power. The vision began to fade. Do not walk the path it sets for you, Naruto. Do not let them make you an island. A fortress of one will always fall. Be the heart of a continent. Now go. Your family is waiting. Naruto's eyes snapped open. The sun was setting, painting the forest in hues of orange and gold. He stood up, the cool water cascading off him, his mind filled with a terrifying clarity and an iron resolve. He had made a mistake. It was time to fix it. He vanished from the waterfall and reappeared in the Occult Research Club building in a silent rush of air. The room was dark, the great leaders gone. Only the Gremory peerage remained, scattered around the room in a state of deep, heartbroken gloom. Rias was sitting in her chair, staring at his note with tear-filled eyes. Akeno was looking out the window, her energy a muted, sorrowful gray. His arrival was like a thunderclap in the silence. They all started, their heads snapping towards him, their eyes wide with a mixture of shock, relief, and hurt. Naruto, Rias whispered, standing up. He walked to the center of the room, his gaze sweeping over each of them. I'm sorry, he said, his voice raw with sincerity. I was wrong. I thought leaving would protect you. I thought my power was the problem, and that I had to face it alone. Quote, he took a deep breath. I was playing right into our real enemy's hands. He then told them everything. The full, unvarnished truth he had learned from Hagoromo. He told them about the first cause, its nihilistic philosophy, and the lingering echo of nothingness. He explained how it was manipulating Malachi, using his righteous fear to sow chaos and to isolate Naruto himself. He laid the cosmic stakes bare, a war not for territory or power, but for the very concept of existence itself. As he spoke, the despair in the room evaporated, replaced by a stunned, then hardening, resolve. They were not just caught in a political squabble. They were on the front lines of a war for reality. This enemy, Naruto concluded, his blue eyes burning with a fierce, unwavering light, it wins if I'm alone. It wins if we are divided by fear. It wins if I give in to the idea that I am too dangerous to be near those I care about. He looked at Rias, at Akeno, at Kiba and Kaneko. At his family. I'm done running. I'm done hiding. And I'm done fighting alone. This is our fight now. I am not just your guest, or your ally. I'm asking you to be my partners. To stand with me, not behind me. Will you help me fight for a world of noisy, messy, beautiful life? There was no hesitation. Rias stepped forward, her eyes shining with renewed strength and an unshakable love. Always, she said. Akeno was at his other side in a flash, her smile returning, brighter and more dangerous than ever. Fufufu, a battle for existence itself. It sounds thrilling. Kiba and Kaneko stepped up behind them, their own resolve like steel. They were no longer just a king and her servants. They were a war council, the first line of defense against the encroaching silence. Their purpose was clear, their unity was their strength. And at their center stood the man who was learning that the greatest power of creation was not making trees from stone, but forging a family in the heart of a storm. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Balance of All Things. In a place that was not a place, a realm of fractured light and silent, screaming chaos, Malachi knelt. The defeat had been absolute, not just of his body, but of his ideology. His sacred spear, a divine concept given form, had been unmade. His army, the pinnacle of heaven's martial might, had been fought to a standstill. And his enemy, the anomaly he was sworn to contain, had shown a control and restraint that defied his every prediction. His certainty, the bedrock of his entire existence, was shattered, and in its place was the terrifying abyss of doubt. It was in that abyss that the true enemy finally spoke to him, not as a whisper, but as a promise. You fought to prevent a flood, and so you brought a bucket to a tsunami, the voice echoed in his mind. It was a sound of immense age and profound weariness, the sigh of a dying star. Your methods are insufficient. Your tools, flawed. The cancer cannot be contained. It must be excised. Absolutely. Who are you? Malachi asked the emptiness, his own voice hoarse. I am the peace you seek. I am the silence at the end of all songs. I am the cure. The voice offered him a vision, a universe still and silent. Free from pain, free from chaos, free from the agonizing friction of life itself. A perfect, clean, final state of being. It was beautiful. It was horrifying. It was, he realized with a dawning dread, the only logical conclusion to his own crusade. Your will is righteous, but your power is finite, the voice continued. I can give you the authority to enact the final, necessary surgery. The power to enforce the silence. The strength to unmake the flaw. Accept my gift, and you will save everything. Desperate, broken, and seeing no other path, the archangel Hu-Ha-D only ever wanted to protect reality made his final, tragic mistake. He surrendered his doubt, his pain, and his will to the promise of peace. I accept, Malachi whispered. And the echo of nothingness, the sentient silence that had waited for millennia, poured a sliver of its true, conceptual power into its new, willing avatar. Malachi's armor did not glow, it darkened, the pristine white shifting to a deep, matte black that absorbed all light. The holy aura around him was not corrupted, it was inverted, becoming a tangible field of absolute null energy. His eyes, once the color of a frozen sky, became twin pools of starless void. He was no longer an angel of justice. He was an avatar of the end. Back in Kuo town, the first sign that something was terribly wrong was not a sound, but the lack of one. Laughter in a nearby park faded into listless silence. The vibrant colors of street-side flower stands seemed to desaturate, turning a dull, uniform gray. The very air grew thin, not with cold, but with a profound emptiness. Naruto and the others felt it as a sudden, psychic drain. It was a subtle, creeping chill that targeted not the body, but the soul. Kiba, in the middle of a sparring match with Kaneko, suddenly lowered his sword, a look of confusion on his face. "What's the point?" he murmured. Kaneko stopped, the snack she was about to eat held forgotten in her hand. "Rias," Akeno whispered, a hand flying to her chest. "I feel distant from you." Rias felt it too, a fraying of the deep, sisterly bond that had connected them for years. The love, the trust, the shared history, it was all still there. But it was being overlaid with a strange, dissociative fog. Naruto felt the warmth of his connections to all of them being leached away, replaced by the familiar, agonizing echo of his childhood loneliness. "He's attacking the town," Naruto said, his voice grim. "No, not the town. The idea of the town. He's attacking our bonds." Malachi had returned, and this time, his weapon was despair itself. The attack was so fundamental, so alien, that it sent an immediate, high-priority alarm through the command structures of all three factions. This was not demonic magic or holy power. This was an assault on the very fabric of sentient life. Within minutes, emergency communiques flooded the ORC. Searzex, Azazel, and a grim-faced Archangel Michael appeared as projections. There was no more debate. No more politics. They were all staring into the same abyss. "We understand now." Michael's voice was heavy with sorrow. "Malachi has fallen. He has made a pact with the very force he swore to defend us against. His choir has been quarantined, but he himself, he is no longer one of ours." "This conceptual decay is spreading," Azazel added, his usual academic excitement replaced by stark terror. "If we don't contain it, it could wash over the entire planet. We will form a quarantine," Searzex declared, his authority absolute. "The full might of our armies will create a conceptual barrier around this town. We will hold the line and stop the spread. But we cannot enter. The effect is too strong. Naruto, Rias, whatever happens within that barrier is up to you." The projections vanished. The lines were drawn. The world held its breath as a silent, invisible war began. Naruto, Rias, and Akeno shot into the sky, ascending into the epicenter of the unnatural silence. They found him floating high above the town, a black hole in human form. His presence devoured the light, his void-like aura causing the very air around him to fizzle out of existence. "You see now, anomaly." Malachi's voice was a dead, flat echo, devoid of all its previous passion. "Emotion is chaos. Bonds are weakness. Love is the flaw in the design. The universe craves the peace of silence. I am merely its instrument." The Malachi I fought believed he was saving the world. Naruto yelled, his own power flaring to life. "You're just a puppet for a force that wants to destroy it. To saw, a thing is to return it to its perfect, original state," the avatar of the void replied. "And the original state is nothingness." He raised a hand, and a wave of pure, unmaking energy washed towards them. Naruto met it with a blast of golden creation, but the two forces cancelled each other out in a silent, jarring implosion. Rias and Akeno unleashed their own attacks, a torrent of destruction and a storm of lightning. But they were simply swallowed by Malachi's null energy field, vanishing without a trace. "Your power is irrelevant," Malachi stated. "Energy cannot affect the absence of energy. Life cannot touch the void." They engaged, a desperate, three-pronged assault against an enemy who was less a person and more a walking paradox. Every attack they launched was nullified. Every move they made felt sluggish, drained of intent by the conceptual decay he exuded. Naruto felt the despair gnawing at him, the voice of the echo whispering in the back of his mind, telling him it was hopeless. That his struggle was just another pointless noise before the inevitable silence. He fought it, but the pressure was immense. He was trying to wield the infinite potential of creation and destruction while his own spirit was under direct assault. He was losing control. He's trying to make you weep, Rias said suddenly, her eyes wide with a terrible realization. She remembered Malachi's creed. This was his endgame, to push Naruto into a state of absolute despair. Naruto gritted his teeth, his power fluctuating wildly. I can't find my balance. He's too loud in my head. The echo was winning. Seeing him falter, knowing that everything depended on this one moment, Rias and Akeno acted. They shot to his sides, ignoring the battle, ignoring the void-clad angel before them. Rias grabbed his left hand, the one that crackled with the dark energy of destruction. She poured her own will, her own essence, into his. Listen to me, Naruto. She commanded, her voice a clarion call in the chaos. My power is not an ending. It is the force that clears the slate for a new beginning. It is not the void, it is the night that makes the dawn possible. Feel it. Her own power of destruction resonated with his, not fighting it, but grounding it, giving it purpose beyond simple erasure. At the same time, Akeno took his right hand, the one that pulsed with the golden light of creation. She channeled her own, perfectly balanced energy into him. And my power is not just light, she said, her voice a fierce, loving anchor. It is the life that grows in the dark. It is the promise that the dawn will always come. It is the bond between two halves of a whole. Feel it, Naruto. Feel us. Their power, their love, their unwavering faith flowed into him. Rias, the queen of destruction, gave his darkness a purpose. Akeno, the priestess of thunder and light, gave his light a foundation. They were not his cheerleaders. They were his anchors, the twin pillars that allowed him to bridge the infinite gap between being and non-being. The chaos in Naruto's mind stilled. The voice of the echo was silenced by the voices of his partners. He found his center. He looked at Malachi, and for the first time, he saw not an enemy to be destroyed, but a victim to be saved. He brought his hands together, Rias's and Akeno's still holding them. The golden light of creation and the black void of destruction did not clash. They flowed. They merged. They swirled together into a perfect, harmonious sphere of shimmering, twilight gray energy. It was the color of reality itself, the balance of all things. It's over, Malachi, Naruto said, his voice calm and absolute. He thrust his clasped hands forward. The sphere of balanced energy did not shoot out as a beam. It expanded, a gentle, silent wave of pure, conceptual law. It was not an attack. It was a reset. It was the universe reasserting its own nature. The wave washed over Malachi. It did not burn him or erase him. It passed through him, and as it did, the black void-like armor cracked like glass. The null energy field dissolved. The sliver of the echo's power, anathema to this wave of perfect balance, was ripped from his soul with a silent, psychic scream. He was left floating in the sky, himself again, the righteous archangel, his holy armor shattered, his eyes wide with the horrifying memory of what he had become. He collapsed, his consciousness overwhelmed, and began to fall from the sky. As he fell, his eyes, now their normal sky blue, glowed black one last time. A voice, no longer a whisper but a clear, cold, cosmic proclamation, spoke through him, broadcasting itself into the minds of all who were listening. The song is not over. When all lights fade and all voices fall silent, I will be the last sound you hear. I am the end. I am the silence. I am inevitable. The presence vanished. The conceptual decay over Kuo town evaporated in an instant. Color, life, sound, and feeling rushed back in, a vibrant, joyous flood. Malachi, now just an exhausted, broken angel, was caught by a waiting contingent of his own kind, who appeared in a portal of light to take him into custody. Naruto, Rias, and Akeno remained floating in the sky, their hands still clasped. They were drained, physically and emotionally, but they were united. They had faced the avatar of the end and had won, not with power, but with balance. Not as individuals, but as one. The battle was over, but as they looked out over their now saved town, they knew, with a certainty that chilled them to the bone, that the true war had only just begun. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. A New Dawn. The week after Malachi's fall was a period of strange, surreal calm. The conceptual decay had vanished, leaving Kuo Town and its inhabitants blinking in the sudden return of vibrant life. Like a sleeper waking from a long, gray dream. Under the coordinated efforts of the three factions, the physical damage to the city was repaired with magical speed. Buildings were restored, craters were filled, and the collective memory of the populace was gently altered. The terrifying angelic invasion softened into the story of a severe, freakish storm. The occult Research H Club building became the de facto capital of a new world. The leaders of the factions, Sears X Lucifer, a humbled but resolute Archangel Michael, and a deeply sobered Azazel, convened not as rivals but as the architects of a necessary, unprecedented alliance. The information provided by a repentant Malachi, now in a secluded heavenly cloister for healing and reflection, had laid the full, terrifying scope of the threat bare. The echo of nothingness was real, it was ancient, and its goal was the cessation of all existence. In the final summit, held in the Gremory Grand Hall, they formally addressed Naruto, who stood before them not as a defendant or an anomaly, but as the world's acknowledged nexus of power. The old order is insufficient to face this threat, Michael stated, his voice resonating with a weary gravity. We were so concerned with the balance of power between our own factions that we failed to see the far greater threat from outside. We cannot make that mistake again. We propose the formation of a new, independent fourth pillar, Sears X continued, his expression serious. A position of absolute authority, beholden to no single faction but with the full military and logistical support of all three. An arbiter, a guardian, a first and last line of defense against the silence. We offer this position to you, Naruto Uzumaki. Azazel nodded in agreement. We'll give you anything you want. Resources, armies, a celestial fortress. Name it, it's yours. You are the only one with the power to face the Echo directly. The offer was staggering. It was a position of power or beyond that of any king or god in their world. The entire room waited, the fate of their new alliance hanging on his answer. Naruto listened patiently, then gave a small, respectful bow. I am honored by your trust, he said, his voice clear and firm. But I cannot accept. A shocked silence fell over the hall. My power, Naruto explained, looking at each of the leaders in turn, is at its strongest when it is balanced. My will is the same. To accept a title, to build an army, to sit on a throne, that is to choose a side, even if that side is everyone. It creates a hierarchy. It builds walls, and our enemy is a force that preys on division. It wins when we build walls. He straightened up, his gaze sweeping over his friends, Rias, Akeno, Kiba, Kaneko, who stood beside him. I will not be your king or your general. I will be a guardian, a friend to any who value the noise and chaos of life. I will protect this world, and any others I can reach, not because of a title, but because it is my home. And because my family lives here. His refusal was not an act of arrogance, but of profound wisdom. In turning down their offer of supreme power, he proved he was the one person in existence who could be trusted with it. The leaders looked at each other, a slow, dawning understanding on their faces. They had offered him a crown, but he had just shown them what it truly meant to be a leader. Later that evening, the politics were over, the world's leaders had departed, and a quiet, intimate peace settled over the Gremory estate. Rias found Naruto on a high balcony overlooking the vast, crimson expanse of the underworld. They stood in comfortable silence for a long time, watching the strange constellations glitter in the twilight sky. You could have had everything, Rias said softly. Power, authority, a kingdom of your own. I already have everything I want, he replied, turning to look at her. The soulfire lights of the castle cast a warm glow on her face, and he saw not just the powerful king of the Gremory clan, but the woman who had faced down her own counsel for him, the partner who had helped him find his balance in the heart of the void. The future of our world is uncertain, she said, her voice barely a whisper. We're standing on the precipice of a war that might be unwinnable. Then we'll face it together, he said, his voice a simple statement of fact. He reached out and gently took her hand. It wasn't a gesture of romance, but of something deeper. A vow. He was the sage who would stand by the king. The man who would stand with the woman. A quiet understanding passed between them. A promise of a shared future, whatever it may hold. He found Akeno the next day, back in the human world, tending to the small, restored shrine on the academy grounds. She moved with a newfound serenity, a gentle grace that spoke of a spirit finally at peace with itself. She smiled as he approached, a genuine, radiant expression that held all the warmth of a sunrise. "It's beautiful again," he said, gesturing to the clean wooden structure and the freshly swept stones. "All it needed was a little care," she replied, her violet eyes soft. "And someone to believe it was worth saving." She turned to him, her smile holding a depth of emotion that needed no words. "Thank you, Naruto-kun. Not for fighting my battles, but for showing me I was strong enough to win them myself." He saw the woman who had woven her darkness and light into a beautiful, perfect storm. The woman who had taken her deepest scars and turned them into her greatest strengths. He saw her, whole and unbroken, and his heart was filled with a profound, quiet joy. Theirs was a bond forged in shared pain, now reforged into a shared peace. That night, the five of them were gathered back where it all began, the main hall of the Occult Research Club building. A fire crackled in the hearth. Kiba and Kaneko were playing a lazy game of chess. Rias was curled up in a plush armchair, reading a thick, ancient tome. Akeno was humming softly as she prepared a pot of tea, and Naruto was standing by the large bay window, looking out at the star-filled night sky. The scene was so simple, so wonderfully, achingly normal. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated peace, a quiet domesticity that was the ultimate prize they had been fighting for. Akeno brought him a cup of tea, her hand brushing against his. Rias looked up from her book, a soft smile on her lips. They came to stand with him by the window, the three of them together, a perfect, stable triangle of love, trust, and unwavering partnership. There was no jealousy, no choice to be made. They were three parts of a single, stronger whole. "It's a clear night," Rias said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Almost peaceful," Akeno added, her own hand finding his. Naruto didn't answer for a moment. He raised a hand, pointing to a specific, bright blue star high in the celestial dome. It was a brilliant, steady point of light in the vast, velvet darkness. "Watch," he said, his voice quiet, almost a whisper. They focused on it, their breath held. The star shone, a beacon of a distant, living solar system millions of light years away. It shone for 1 second, then 2, and on the 3rd second, it simply went out. It did not explode in a supernova. It did not fade. One moment, it was a brilliant pinprick of existence. The next, there was only a perfect, empty blackness where it had been. It had been cleanly, surgically, and instantly erased from the tapestry of the cosmos. A profound, soul-deep chill settled in the warm, comfortable room. The true, terrifying scale of the war ahead had just been made terrifyingly, silently clear. Their enemy was not a threat to a town, or a country, or even a single world. It was a threat to everything. Rias's hand tightened on his shoulder. Akeno's fingers interlaced with his. He didn't look at them. He kept his gaze fixed on the empty spot in the sky, a silent vow passing between the three of them. The peace was over. The real work was about to begin. "It started," Naruto said, his voice calm, steady, and filled with the iron resolve of a man who was ready to fight for every last noisy, chaotic, and beautiful star in the sky. Chapter 10 End.